was pretty definitive.
I feel like you might have.
I admire people who run in the marathon. I have the wherewithal to go 13 miles, maybe 14. You start getting into the 2021. That's just, it's just too much time to train. Like, you have to train like hours on the weekends. I don't have the time for that. I don't think my knees have the time for that either. Up next, the morning calls, plus Vivek Arya of Bank of America Securities as NVIDIA is ramping up its chip rollout with some fresh deals. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories.
The economy has been doing well. That does not tell you what the future is going to be.
We are taking a step-by-step approach, a very systematic approach with India.
This is a time to put a little more defense into your portfolio.
Inside has Linda on it.
Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are live streaming on Rumble and on YouTube. My website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please help support the work by making sure you subscribe to all my channels. The links are in the description of all my videos. Click those links, subscribe to YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can follow me on X and GETTR. You can also follow me on TikTok, Substack, and Patreon. If you like the content that I create, please help support the work by donating. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Substack and Patreon channel. All these videos I do are for free. I have thousands of videos out there for free to inform the public about my opinion of the news, how I think the markets are moving and how to navigate through them, and also how to improve your health and wellness. So please help support the work that I do. I greatly appreciate it. I have great products on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can get supplements. I have ebooks and also course material on immunology and pulmonology, so you can learn about those different systems. So please help support the work that I do. With that said, make sure you start preparing for the fall and the winter season. And you can do that by getting the lozenges and the drops that I have. By mitigating throat irritation right away, you will be able to weather the storm. Now, please go to my store and get the elderberry zinc lozenges, or you can also get the drops in blueberry, cherry flavor, and also honey and lemon. Get a few bags for your household and for work. Right when you have that throat irritation, take them right away to mitigate the problem. This is extremely important for this fall and winter season. So please go to my store, use discount 5, all caps, discount number 5, get $5 off any order. Get the lozenges and the drops, be prepared. All right, let's continue with Bloomberg.
And his push to try to sell more into China.
Sure. Good morning. So a few days ago, we had a chance to attend their GTC conference in Washington, D.C. So I think there were three important points that came out. First is that AI is absolutely an ongoing industrial revolution. It's very important for the government to stimulate and nurture it. It's the next productivity tool, and it is not just the government here in the U.S. I think we see this as a global phenomenon. You mentioned he was in Korea, he was in China earlier. So every government in the world, I think, understands that this is a very important tool to nurture. Second is that NVIDIA's full stack approach is seeing applications in a lot of end markets. There's not just some chips that are deployed in a data center somewhere. They're having real world applications and implications in markets such as industrial, such as healthcare, such as cybersecurity, even emerging markets such as quantum and such as robotics. And then finally, the company's visibility extends out till the end of next year, at least $500 billion of orders for its new Blackwell and upcoming Vera Rubin platform. And I think what you're seeing with the CEOs' travels and engagements is to make sure that the supply chain is ready. Korea is an important source of memory chips and some foundry capability. It's one thing to say that you have orders for $500 billion, but the supply chain has to be there to adopt it. And then finally, when it comes to China, we have it at zero in our model. I think it's just too hard to predict where the geopolitical nature of these engagements is going to go. It's an important market. We think it's about 10% of the overall market, but I think NVIDIA can do just fine without engaging with China in the near term.
We can get into the supply chain securitization that they're working on, as well as this discussion around how much they are connected to the geopolitics of the moment. But I am curious about why NVIDIA is not threatened by any of the other chip makers that seem to be really pushing to try to get in on the game. And we've seen AMD do well, we've seen Qualcomm do well, we've seen the shares of a number of these companies surge, and yet hasn't dented NVIDIA's lead. Why?
Sure. The very simple visual I can give you, it's the competitors are essentially creating a sitcom at a time, whereas NVIDIA is like the Netflix of the market. That they have developed a full stack approach. Their CUDA software, came into place in 2007. So I think they're in the 14th generation of that. They will soon start their third generation of implementing racks. So what you get from the company is essentially a lot of integration of their hardware and software. There are over 5 million developers who can work with their platform. It's available in every public cloud. Whereas a number of their competitors are still developing their first rack scale architecture, and the software is still in infancy. Some of the custom chip suppliers that you mentioned have no software. The customer has to develop that. And in other cases, the merchant suppliers, have a decent hardware platform, but they've never actually implemented rack scale. So I think it's important to put them on a level playing field, and from that perspective, NVIDIA is several years ahead of that.
Vivek, it feels like the rules of the road when it comes to China. We still don't know, even in things that were supposedly agreed upon. The H20, a glaring example of this agreement reached with the White House, where the U.S. would get 15% of the revenue. They've yet to establish a legal framework for it. How do you think it ultimately shakes out?
Yeah, I think, China is an important market for two important reasons. One is that their software community is extremely innovative. Unlike a lot of the West, which is, in many cases going after artificial general intelligence, going after the biggest models, the most comprehensive models, there's a big part of the Chinese software ecosystem that is going after a lot more practical applications. And I think in some ways, not having resources has become part of the innovation cycle for them. So it's very important to engage with China. But having said that, if you look at the spending by their top hyperscalers, it is still less than 10% of overall spend. So it's important to engage with China. It's important to stay, competitive. But NVIDIA, we think, can grow their top line over 50% next year without having much contribution from China. I think on the geopolitical side, I think the US wants to make sure that that there is some scrutiny, there is some limitation on what technology is exported. The H20 is a product that is at this point basically 3 years old, and I think what China is probably interested in is the Blackwell variant of what NVIDIA can supply, but it's hard to know whether that specific new variant will be approved by the US government. So that's why we are assuming no contribution from China data center in our model.
Vivek, you mentioned the hyperscalers, of which we got the earnings this week, spending of $72 billion for the year for Meta. Alphabet, it's 90-30. Amazon, it's $125 billion. As long as the hyperscalers are putting up those kinds of numbers, do you remain bullish on NVIDIA?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the right point, that it is really capital spending by these top customers. And what I would also mention is that in each of those earnings reports, you heard them say that they are starved of capacity. Right, that it is not demand, it is capacity, it's supply constraints. Otherwise, they could have grown even faster. And you saw most of them exceed expectations for their cloud computing revenues. That's why we think this thing is a lot more real than sometimes people give it credit for. And as NVIDIA comes out with the new generation of the platform, it provides a lot more computing power per unit space, per unit power. And that I think is a real constraint. How fast can data centers be built out? How fast can power and water be available to them? And that's where I think the governments, the US government can be extremely helpful in approving these data centers, providing them with power. But I think as power becomes available, you will see a lot more AI deployment. And then finally, I did want to mention that NVIDIA, the stock itself, if we are right about the visibility they shared with us at GTC, is essentially trading at a market multiple for a company that is able to grow 5 times as fast as the market and grow earnings 7 times as fast as the market, and is basically trading at a market multiple. So we do think that the stock still remains very compelling.
Vivek Arya, Bank of America Securities, with the best analogy all day, right. The idea of...
We're going to go to Times Radio dealing with King Charles. I mean, the news announcement happened yesterday at around 3 o'clock New York time. King Charles took away the trappings and the titles to Andrew. So let's listen to Times Radio about that particular topic. But before we do, please make sure you go to my website and be prepared for the fall and the winter season. Get the structural nano silver soaps. They're very high quality. You can get it in peppermint, in lavender, in lemongrass, and charcoal tea tree. Get a few bars for your household. Be prepared for the fall and winter season. But you should be using these soaps year-round. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
Is us, the great British public, Will and me, and everybody listening, say, where's all this money coming from? And basically, it comes from us. And therefore, they've got to change this business of the 2 big duchies, which are their main source of income, which they don't acknowledge is public money.
Andrew is no longer a prince and has been banished to the Sandringham estate, where he'll live at the king's expense. So, has the king done enough to mean the royal family can move on from the scandals that have long surrounded the king's brother? Well, with us now, the historian A.N. Wilson. Good morning.
Hi, Callum.
It's lovely to see you. And also deputy editor of the New Statesman, Will Lloyd. Hello, Will.
Hello, Callum. Hi. And hello, Miss Wilson.
Hello there.
It's great to have you both with us. Will's been writing this week about why now could be, and in fact should be, the time to abolish the monarchy. We will bring that factor in and that discussion in just a sec. But let's start with the history, I suppose, Andrew, of what we're talking about here and how unprecedented this moment actually is.
Well, I mean, nothing like this has ever happened before. That's absolutely true. And it will bring with it all sorts of implications, which I'm sure we're going to hear about how we fund the royal family, basically. And it really all goes back. I've written a lot in my life about Queen Victoria. It really all goes back to her, because at the beginning of her reign, these 2 huge duchies, Duchy of Lancaster, Duchy of Cornwall, which were really public money, she insisted that she should keep as personal property. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister at the time said, no, you can't, it's public money. But she did. And with that money, she built Balmoral, Sandringham, Osborne House, and they put all the money, they continue to put all the money into their pockets. And that really is the origin of all this problem, because the royal family, like most families, have got their black sheep, and the black sheep have been pretty black in history. Prince Andrew is not alone in all this, though he is pretty ghastly, of course he is. And if they were behaving abominably in private, without drawing money from the public sector, from the public purse, this row wouldn't be so dangerous politically. And that's really the trouble, that it's not just that Andrew was involved with Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein. Just look at the guest list for his 18-year-old girl's birthday party. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. But it isn't just that. It's the fact that he's been living a life of extreme extravagance, and so is his ex-wife. You're paying, the listeners to this program, the taxpayers of this country are paying for people who live in Crown estate properties unless they pay a decent rent.
Yeah, so everyone's got a stake in it.
Everybody's got a stake. And also the other thing to bear in mind, before we get on to our Republican talk, is that most people in this country want to have a monarchy. And therefore you've got to, given that democratic fact, I think you've got to do all you can politically, whether you want monarchy or not, to recognise that most people want it. And in order to keep it as a plausible political alternative to republicanism, you've got to make it plausible. And at the moment, it is slightly implausible because of this money thing.
Well, let's get Will Lloyd in on that, because, Will, you've been making the case just this week that now is the time to abolish the royal family.
Growing your agency means helping your SMB clients grow. To them, that means getting new customers and keeping them. Today's customers expect
to abolish the royal family.
I've been making the case that we don't really understand the House of Windsor. The public doesn't understand it very well. And if the public did understand the House of Windsor, and they did understand the detail of what the protection and the obstacles thrown up to defend Prince Andrew, they'd be very angry. And I think if they realised that the monarch was not a ceremonial or symbolic monarch, the monarch is a political player with their own interests, which they pursue, then we might start to see the apathy and indifference that currently exists among the public towards the House of Windsor turn into something more like anger and disgust. And then possibly you'd have a republic. Although I don't really like the word republic, and I don't really like contemporary republicanism.
Well, I mean, a political system that doesn't have a monarch is a republic, whether you like the word or not.
We might have. We don't know. We may have another. Why not have the Stuarts back? Where are they? Where's the Duke of Bavaria? I simply think.
Well, we all know the answers to these questions. Of course we do. But I mean, I'm half on your side about wanting to get rid of the monarchy, but the half of me that isn't is partly guided by what I said earlier, that most people want to keep the monarchy. And why do they want to keep it? I'm amazed you should say people are indifferent to the House of Windsor. We've just spent hours on this program. Every newspaper in the land, everybody, every family in the land over their breakfast are talking about this strange family. So I don't think we are indifferent to them. And one of the reasons we aren't is if you look back over the history of the 20th century, which were the countries which didn't go down the path of having dictatorships and tyrannies, whether communists or fascists looking after them, and they were the constitutional monarchies. And I'm very guided by that. And it was partly George V and his successive governments that stopped this country either becoming fascist or communist. And that's a fact. That's a historical fact. Whether we've grown out of it now, that's a matter of discussion. But it isn't just, as you say, it's certainly not just ceremonial. It is a political entity, constitutional monarchy, i.e. you have a figurehead who's not powerful, not political, and then you have an elected parliament guiding them and how to rule the country. And I think that's the system that's worked, and most people want it to go on working.
Will, where I say indifference, this is what I mean. On the 19th of September 2022, when the State Hearse took what remained of Queen Elizabeth II and her crown into the grounds of Windsor Castle towards St George's Chapel and towards the cheerful English heaven that she believed in, I was there. and I was with the crowds, and I've been with the crowds for the 10 days previously, following the mourning process for our monarch. And we all talked about the queue, and 250,000 people queued up. But I was in those crowds for 10 days.
They're not going to queue up.
They did not know how to, let me finish. They did not know how to behave. And when I went home each night, I would look at photos of Queen Victoria's funeral and the way in which the British behaved when she died. We do not have the link with a constitutional monarchy. We do not have the religious belief.
What was the difference in behaviour, Will, can I ask?
Well, people mourned, whereas where I was on the long walk in Windsor, I was with a group of Brazilian tourists who thought this was a good time to light a split as the crown went to...
Well,
there's a disconnect.
I don't want to come the Victorian historian, but Queen Victoria was openly booed on the streets of London, more or less whenever she appeared. Certainly when she went to the East End, she was not a popular figure. Queen Elizabeth II was, funnily enough, though she was a shy, withdrawn character, nobody knows much about her. She was an adored figure. And I mean, you mentioned the mood of people having a bit of a smoke or having some wheat in the queue. They were queuing up. And certainly the people who were queuing up to pay their respects to the body in Westminster, I don't think you're right to say that there was no air of mourning. She was such a strange and shy figure that I don't think you can feel mourning for somebody you don't feel you know. But there was an enormous feeling of respect, not just for her, but for the institution. And it's that feeling of respect, whether or not you share it, that's a totally different matter, and whether or not you're smoking a bit of weed as you have these thoughts. It's totally, what is troubling about Prince Andrew is that he was smearing that feeling of respect and honour, which we have not just for the people, but for the institution.
Yeah. Will, does this feel different, I suppose? The Andrew scandal, the fact that he is being stripped of his prince title now, today, why is this a more defining moment for the royal family than previous conflicts or difficulties with public opinion or scandals?
I'm not going to be able to give you more history than Mr. Wilson.
No, I'm not trying to be clever, sorry.
No, you are, I love your work. But I would say in recent history, the first photos of Andrew with Epstein appeared in the British press in March 2011. In April 2014, he was rewarded for this. He was given pitch at the palace, and that continued for some years. In November 2019, he appeared on Newsnight, and he lied. And then in February 2022, he paid off Virginia Giuffre. Now, at any moment in that sequence, what happened yesterday probably ought to have happened, okay? And instead, he was protected. Now, I know he denies the allegations against him, but I was astonished to read in the national press on the weekend briefings from the palace comparing the late Queen Elizabeth II to an ostrich who had her head in the sand. This was this figure that we were supposed to respect and revere. And the palace itself is now comparing her to one of the silliest living animals on Earth. I think, in my lifetime, that's quite different. And I think they're undermining themselves in ways they don't understand. And I think it is dangerous for them.
Well, just a couple of thoughts to put to you.
Well, I don't think it was King Charles who was comparing his mother to an ostrich, but we can understand what they mean by that. And also the fact that it clearly was a terrible misjudgment. She wasn't a perfect human being. I'm saying she was a much respected human being.
I think at the heart of this, actually, is one of Will's questions from your article, Will, in the New Statesman, and I'm going to put this to you, Andrew, which is what exactly is being protected at this stage? And I wonder if there is historic comparisons to be made here, are historic comparisons to be made here, with when the royal family has been in turmoil, and the same question could be asked, what is it that's being protected?
Well, I think, I don't want to repeat myself, but the main thing they're worried about is us, the great British public, Will and me, and everybody listening, say, where's all this money coming from? And basically it comes from us. And therefore they've got to change this business of the two big duchies, which are their main source of income, which they don't acknowledge is public money. And I think that's the thing that they are most worried about. Obviously, they're frightened of any kind of intrusion into their private life. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing, and particularly nowadays. When look at what has happened in Prince Andrew's life. What he's done is awful, but at the same time, he is a human being. He's now retreating, and how will he ever be able to appear in public again without somebody wanting to attack him? His position, I'm not saying it's tragic, but it's appallingly sad.
Yeah, he does deny all wrongdoing.
I know he does, but you see, when he denies it, but then his own brother says that he's stripping him of his titles.
Yes.
And then at the end, he says, although he denies all this, we, and it suddenly becomes him and Camilla, their majesties, can deeply and profoundly sympathize, the words to that effect, with all the victims. Well, I mean, that is in effect saying they don't believe him, that they're with Will. And the vast majority of people who've heard the Emily Maitlis interview, they don't believe the testimony. Well, they can't believe it because it's been proved to be untrue.
Yeah. And Will, just a final one for you on that question: what is being protected at this stage? And I suppose the follow-up, as far as you're concerned, is it abolition or bust, or would you take a Prince William reformed royal family, perhaps?
I think that they should sort of self-liquidate and it should be thrown to the public, and we should decide, and it could be a moment of national restoration and renewal, because at the moment it's a time of national grief. I think we should expect our head of state and their family to represent us, to meet our unspoken needs and desires, and they're not doing that. And the thing that really worries me, and I put this in the piece, is that William doesn't even believe in God. How can he have a coronation in Westminster Abbey if he doesn't believe in God? The other thing that comes out about William, if you read recent royal biographies and books closely, is that he struggles to read properly. He doesn't like receiving written briefings. He likes oral ones. He can't name a favourite author, but he does have an interest in Batman-related superhero movies. Now, the last functionally illiterate monarch was William II in 1110. So this is a kind of once in a millennia.
Well, we're going back to a good tradition, in other words. I mean, I think William's got a very high view of the monarchy, and that's one of the reasons he wants it to replace it with something. Whereas I have a low view of the monarchy. I think it's a good functioning system. I think most of the people who occupy the world have been pretty hopeless in one way or another. And quite honestly, whether Prince William can read or whether he believes in God is in a sense secondary.
I'm going to expect children to read, don't we?
No, but they don't expect all the children to be. You only expect one child at a time to become a constitutional monarch. It's a very modest. It's a very modest role. That's why the Queen was, in a way, a rather boring person. Did it so well.
Okay. Thank you both so much for your considerations this morning. That is what Times Radio is for, and we're very grateful to have your brain power.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do by getting the great products that I offer. And if you follow my protocol, you take these supplements regularly, you're going to slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link's in the description of this video, and get the C60. C60 is 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C in terms of an antioxidant. You can get an MCT coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, and also in avocado oil. You can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. It's all caps, discount number 5. And take a teaspoon a day every day, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning. Take it every day, teaspoon a day, and what will happen is you're going to be soaking up free radicals at the cellular level, around the cellular matrix, the extracellular matrix, and also in your vascular system and even your neurons. But by soaking up free radicals, you're reducing stress on your tissues and in your cells. You're improving the health of your mitochondria. So you'll have more ATP, so you'll have more energy. Your cells and tissues will perform better, and therefore your organ systems will perform better, including your immune system and your endocrine system. For your vascular system, it's going to soak up free radicals and reduce the concentration of oxidized LDL. Because LDL that's floating around in your bloodstream gets oxidized because of the free radicals. Well, if you soak up those free radicals, you have less oxidized LDL. Now, oxidized LDL eventually turns into plaque. Well, if you have less oxidized LDL, you have less plaque. So by taking C60, you're actually helping your cardiovascular system. Now, C60 will also reduce stress in the neuron and soak up free radicals, so your mitochondria and your neurons will be able to produce the ATP that you need to produce the neurotransmitters. So over time, your neuroplasticity will improve. That means you're going to be able to think better, you'll have better memory. So please go to my store, take the C60 every day, a teaspoon a day. If you work out, take it right before your workout. You'll be soaking up the free radicals that you're generating during your workout, and you will recover quicker from your workout. This is very strong, very potent antioxidant. Take it every day. It'll also improve the basal layer of your skin. So in 1 year, before and after, in 1 year of taking this, you will physically see a difference in the way you look. You will look younger. In addition, within 2 months, you're going to start feeling the effects where your immune system, your endocrine system, and your other organ systems are performing better. So please go to my store and get the C60 in avocado oil, MCT coconut oil, or extra virgin olive oil in a 2 ounce, 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. But you should be taking this every day. And my overall anti-aging stack is very simple. Multivitamin, probiotic is the foundation. The first pillar is Max 35 or cleanse to boost up the immune system, the innate immune system. C60, soak up free radicals, bring down stress in the cell. The third pillar is the turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans. That's going to boost up your immune system, but also help with bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level. And taking Boomer Boost to rev up your metabolism and increase your energy levels. If you pay attention to that stack that I just told you, you are targeting everything that ages you. You're soaking up the free radicals. You're bringing down inflammation. You're boosting up your immune system. If you look at people that start to age, they have high inflammation, high free radical creation, their tissues are stressed, they have less energy, and their metabolism starts to go down. So if you pay attention to what I just said, you will slow down the aging process. Now, I've been doing this for a long time. So please take my advice, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the supplements that I offer and stack them the way I'm telling you to get the max benefit. All right, let's listen into LBC about Prince Andrews.
3 minutes after 10. The royal family has one job. Sorry, I know that was a bit profound. Good morning. Speaking of one job, am I the only one thinking about Rachel Reeves' husband from the perspective of being a slightly feckless husband? By feckless, I mean not very good at the detail. He's a senior civil servant, but I know exactly what he's been through over the course of the last 24 hours. Okay, darling, you're definitely across this, right? You're handling all the rental stuff. Yes, look, I'm 53 years old. Oh, I don't know how old he is actually, but quite close to home. I'm 53-year-old. Stop treating me like a child. I can handle a flipping house rental, for goodness sake. And he got a phone call, presumably on Monday night or Sunday night. I said, darling, did you actually sort out all of the house rentals? And he has spent 24 hours desperately searching through his email history because he was certain that he had done, but he couldn't find the proof. And it turned out that the bloke who said they were going to apply for the license left the letting agency the next day. I don't see any topic here. Sorry, Daily Mail. I know you think it's more important than an actual prince of the realm losing his title, because that is what you've chosen to splash with this morning. Your kind of rapidly deflating balloon of manufactured fury regarding the Chancellor's housing arrangements. But at this point, I can't see any phone-in that would add to what we did yesterday when we described what we thought had happened and what turned out. It doesn't always wash out this way. It turned out had happened. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. If you've got a good way back into that story, then I'll give you the money myself. 5 minutes after 10 is the time. So Andrew stripped of Prince title. We will be joined by the hero of the hour, if that is the correct turn of phrase, in about 11:45, I think, today. We'll talk to Emily Mavis, who, of course, set the ball rolling on the story of our age, the royal story of our age. I've also got a little bit of a tease for you with regard to who will be the... See, I had a conversation with the producer earlier. I thought I'd already told you who the special guest was going to be for Full Disclosure Live next year, raising money for Global's Make Some Noise. It's quite exciting. It's what you might call a crossing of the streams for certain sections of our society. And don't let me go home without remembering to tell you who that is and to tell you how you can get hold of tickets. Will we tell people how to get hold of tickets? Yes, I'm telling you how to get hold of tickets as well. But how do you want to do this, do you think? I mean, it is very rare that every newspaper is united in complete agreement about what the biggest story in town is. And it's so rare, in fact, that it's not even true today. It's almost every newspaper. The Andrew, formerly known as Prince, yeah, well done, the son, we beat you to that as well. King removes style, titles and honours from brother. Andrew stripped of Prince title in historic move to save monarchy. I like that line, historic move to save monarchy. Finally, says the Daily Mirror, Daily Mirror. King begins the process to strip Andrew of Prince title. He's ordered to leave Royal Lodge and Fergie's out too. Wills backs Charles's move amid yet more Epstein fallout. Royals say thoughts are with victims of all abuse. An important addendum to the central announcement yesterday, I thought. The royal formerly known as Prince, says the Daily Star. Andrew no longer Prince, says the Daily Telegraph. Andrew to be stripped of his royal titles and must move out of home, says the Guardian. Andrew stripped of his Prince title and home, says the Times. Humiliation for Reeves as she changes her story, says the Daily Mail. Sometimes I wonder whether I'm exaggerating about how bonkers everybody in that building has gone. But no, I'm not. I mean, it is on the front page as the kind of turn to page 2. But deciding that the biggest story in town is their rapidly deflating balloon of manufactured fury about Rachel Reeves is, even by the standards of the Daily Mail, a moment of well, I mean, they put the word humiliation in red, which seems to be a fairly reliable example of what I believe is called projection. Humiliation for the Daily Mail. As it turns out, Rachel Reeves had done nothing wrong, but that might stop them from printing page after page after page of desperate attempts to portray her as some sort of wrong'un while paying Boris Johnson, who of course had 2 independent ethics advisors resign in disgust at his contempt for ethics, hundreds of thousands of pounds a year to write a newspaper column. I think that's the line I like most. What do you think in the big story? What's the big element? What's the most important aspect of this story? Shall I ask you that question on air? Do you want to ring up and tell me the answer? What's the most important aspect of this story for you? Sadly, public discourse, the establishment, call it what you will, the national narrative does not prioritise victims. If it did, then at the moment that 12 million quid was handed over to a young woman who accused the Queen's son of having had sex with her in return for money she received from Jeffrey Epstein, then this decision would have been taken at that moment. It's perfectly possible, because of course he denies all allegations. It's perfectly possible that he gave 12 million quid to her for no reason whatsoever, apart from entirely unfounded allegations. But it seems, I think we could all agree, unlikely. In the great scheme of things, who here has given a significant sum of money to somebody to stop them making entirely false and unfounded allegations? Hands up. That's all. I'm just saying, he denies it all, but he hasn't really explained why he's given her 12 million quid of his late mother's money. So what do you think the most important element of this story is? 03456060973. That's your sort of bubbling under question. That's not the central thrust. How much trouble? Here's a double header for you. Right, pause. Rewind. Think. How much trouble is the monarchy in? My answer to that is not a lot. I think, whether you're going to file it under better late than never, or whether you're going to file it under doff cap tuck forelock, he's the king. Therefore, can we all please move along and stop asking why action wasn't taken much sooner? Even as recently as a fortnight ago, he made what he hoped would be the final move in this saga, and it turned out to be not enough, too little and too late. How significant is this for the monarchy? My answer is not very, but I want to know what your answer is. How significant should it be? Am I alone this morning in thinking that this, not unlike the aftermath of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, is one of those moments when you realise that the entire edifice is vulnerable? It's so bizarre to grow up with something utterly baked into the national consciousness that is entirely and demonstrably optional. I'm not a particularly Republican individual. I think, and I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I think my attitude to the royal family is going to be defined by its inhabitants rather than by any reverence for an institution or tradition. I think I won't feel any particularly Republican stirrings in my guts if the people in the big jobs are behaving with what appears to be decorum and or decency. I don't know that you can say you were fond of the late Queen, although of course a lot of people do. But I thought she was brilliant at what she did, which of course leaves me open to the question of what did she do, James? And I don't know the answer to that question either. She provided focus, leadership of sorts, a sort of fulcrum for feelings, whether they're patriotic feelings or national pride or something else, pageantry, tradition. What did she do? I mean, that's odd, isn't it? She did her job very well. She was brilliant at her job.
It's only taken 250 years, but finally the British are starting to realize that you don't need a monarchy.
What was her job? I think King Charles is playing a blinder as well. I thought that he gave the world a lesson in how to deal with the narcissistic man-child Donald Trump. Other countries now have gone further. South Korea gave him a crown, an actual crown. Apparently, Air Force One is flying back from Asia with the hold absolutely groaning under the weight of, well, if we were watching Flash Gordon, they'd be called space diamonds. So King Charles, without actually handing over much by way of loot or booty, showed the world how to handle the narcissistic man-child that is Donald Trump. Just treats him like a cross between the Pope and Henry VIII, and he'll go home happy regardless of anything else that's going on anywhere in the world. So what is today actually about? It's a reminder that all of it is a man-made edifice. The medieval arguments about a divine right of kings or monarchs being appointed by God, I don't think anybody really subscribes to that anymore, and if they do, they are respectfully too bonkers to pay any attention to. So that ship sailed a long time ago. And what this reminds us of is the very simple fact that it's all entirely confected, the whole shebang. The idea that someone can live in a 30-mansion house for free simply by dint of the fact that a long-distant foreign ancestor slid into an empty seat called the throne at some fortuitous point in history, and his successors and children, grandchildren are dedicated to one thing and one thing only. Because the royal family only have one job, and that is to survive. That's it. The only job the royal family has is to protect the ludicrous system at which they sit at the very top. It's bonkers. And listen, I'm saying it again, not to insulate myself from any particular criticism, but because I mean it. I don't have particularly Republican stirrings in my soul. But on mornings like this, oddly, I go a little bit big picture. I don't really care about Andrew Windsor. I don't certainly intend to lose any sleep about the privations he will hopefully suffer. I don't particularly care about his ex-wife either. I've got a modicum of sympathy. Actually, I've got quite a lot of sympathy for his children. But I don't know them. Maybe they don't deserve any. I go big picture because the more you look at it, the madder the whole business looks. It's extraordinary. So I think what I'm going to ask you today is this. What's the royal family for? 0345 6060 973. I know what they do. They dedicate themselves to surviving long enough to pass all the privilege and pomp on to the next generation. That's the key job. And of course you might say, no, they provide this and that and the other, but they provide this and that and the other in order to safeguard the handing on of all the pomp and privilege, all the plunder and riches to the next generation. That is what their job is. They don't have any other job. If they thought that they would enhance the likelihood of passing everything on to the next generation by behaving like Genghis Khan, they'd be behaving like Genghis Khan. Their job is simply to survive. It's what they do. So from our point of view, what is the royal family for? 034560600973. And how does the disgrace, the unprecedented, that's an overused word, but today it really fits, the unprecedented disgrace of Andrew Windsor affect the whole?
I think they should take a page out of the United States history book, and that is get rid of the king. All right. Back to the economy. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Zeolite. Zeolite is a great way to detoxify your body, and you can do it every day. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. And by doing this, you're going to be binding to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals that are in your body that you need to get rid of. You can get rid of it through just urination within 6 to 8 hours of taking this. And you do that every day. And what happens is that you're flushing out these toxins out of your body, and you're improving your immune system, your endocrine system, your brain function, your different organ systems, like your liver and your kidney and your spleen. These are super important to detoxify. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video, and get the Zeolite. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Get a few items, stack them the way I'm telling you to get the max benefit. And by detoxifying your body and slowing down that aging process, you're going to have more vitality. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Zeolite. Again, you can take this every day. Now, for people that want a heavier detox, what I recommend is to take 10 small drops underneath your tongue, drink the filtered water, do that every day until the bottle's done. Do that once or twice a year. But I think that it's better to actually do a maintenance dose every day. And that way you're flushing out your body every day because you're exposed to toxins every day. Another thing that's really important is make sure you drink filtered water and stay away from processed foods. A lot of these processed foods have toxins in it and chemicals that are not really good for your body. So please go to my store and detoxify your body.
There were strongly differing views about how to proceed in December. A further reduction in the policy rate at the December meeting is not a foregone conclusion. Far from it. Policy is not on a preset course.
Okay, Fed Chair Jerome Powell throwing some cold water on investor hopes for more rate cuts this year, saying the board was deeply divided on how to proceed. But the central bank did cut on Wednesday, bringing interest rates below 4% for the first time since 2022. All right, Larry, you can go anywhere you want to go on this. What happened yesterday, what it means for markets, what the future holds when Jay Powell doesn't have that job. Your choice.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with what I think he said, that we don't know about December. We don't know about December because we don't know about September or October or November for that matter. You know, there's a dearth of information that presumably the Fed uses. I mean, we know what markets are saying. The Atlanta Fed is saying 3.8, 3.9 in the third quarter, ending in September. I hope he's not making that decision just because it looks like the economy is strong. You know, the Fed has a phobia about growth. Growth does not cause inflation. It does not. On the other hand, you know, the last CPI we got was not a fabulous. I know it was below the street and triggered a rally. But the 3-month change for both the top line and the core is 3.6% at an annual rate with a target of 2. And the 12-month change was 3.0 for both with a target of 2. So in that sense, I'm not completely at loggerheads with, I mean, we need now, Energy prices seem to be coming down. Gasoline prices seem to be coming down. Shelter prices seem to be coming down. So by the time we get to December, if we have good information, it may be time to cut again. Okay, inflation will be a lot lower. But I'm just saying,
But
right now, I'm not crazy.
He also knows that when he speaks, markets react. They reacted yesterday. In the Urban Dictionary, they have this word, flexing. I think he was flexing his power, still saying, I'm in charge here, letting Trump know that, letting the market know that. He could have just sat on this uncertainty and done whatever they're going to do in December. If they get more data and things change, they can do that. He didn't have to say what he said yesterday.
Lawrence thinks he might have been inadvertent. It was a response to a question, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He kind of popped it out. So we're polling the next Fed chair, because we need a new Fed chair. And I'm just going to quickly, the Twitter X, which we're polling on Twitter X and Instagram, many more votes on Twitter X. The leading candidate, according to this so far, is Kevin Warsh.
Okay.
Number two actually was me going to write in.
Hey, let's talk about that.
Number three was Kevin Hassett, another brilliant guy. And Scott Bessent was, he may have been tied or close to Hassett as the third. And a lot of people, on my panel last night, I had Steve Forbes and John Carney, and I did the riff on who should be Fed chair, why we need a supply sider running the Fed, tax cuts and tight money. And both my panelists said Bessent. They didn't. And there are 5 candidates, according to Mr. Bessent. Both my panelists, Steve Forbes and John Carney, said Bessent. So, and Bessent got some votes. But Kevin Warsh is the winner.
Yeah, and
Kevin Warsh is winning the
vote. And not a guy who's known to be a dove. I mean, Kevin Warsh, to me, in that group, is kind of has the most evidence of being a fairly hawkish guy, cares about inflation first, not as interested in the dual mandate.
Well, I think
would he work well with President Trump?
Yes, he will. I wouldn't say Kevin Warsh is a supply side. Okay, and that means tax cuts and tight money, or tax cuts and a strong dollar. He's for that. He's absolutely for that. Look, I think they made a mistake. They should be running the balance sheet down more. $6.5 trillion looks weak against $9 trillion, but 10, 15 years ago was less than $1 trillion. And the balance sheet, quote unquote, which we used to call the monetary base back in the Friedman days, I still think they should be running it down. I think they made a mistake.
Rates are now below 4% for the first time in 3 years. Larry, how important it is not just to get lower rates, but to get some of the deregulation, for example, that even President Carter gets a lot of guff, but he, as you know, deregulated a host of industries, which set President Reagan up for a record run. So doesn't President Trump really have an opportunity here to do some long-term deregulation that can really fuel the
economy? But I wouldn't quite have put it that way, your last sentence, but let's not quibble over that. Deregulation is very, very important, and it's operating. I mean, look, the one big beautiful bill is profoundly pro-business and pro-growth and pro-jobs and pro-wages. I mean, it's a very good piece of legislation, and it's a good thing they did one bill, because you can see now with this CR stuff, they never would have gotten 2 bills or 3 bills, which was what I argued till I was blue in the face every night on the air, and Mike Johnson also. So yeah, but Kevin Warsh, believes in low tax rates. He believes in deregulation. He believes in a sound dollar. But he would like to see that monetary-based balance sheet come in a little more, because, we have not totally conquered inflation, I think, right?
Okay, now, agreed.
On the supply side, more investment in production will lower prices. You put more goods on the market. That's very important. The same for deregulations, absolutely the same. But monetary effects are important, too. And I think they should have kept running that thing down. I really do.
Lydia, you brought up last hour jobs. I think that's where your head is in terms of how Jay Powell's maybe thinking about what the Fed's doing, some of the other board members. I wonder if, when you saw what he said yesterday, that
growing your business shouldn't mean growing your overhead. Growth should be seamless with AI-driven workflows built for the way you work. Progress here.
When you saw what he said yesterday, the decision that the Fed made yesterday, do you think at this point they're still very, very focused on jobs as the thing that could deteriorate fastest, and they don't want to be behind that curve?
I mean, it seems like there's a big question mark when it comes to jobs because it doesn't seem like we're creating a whole lot. We're not getting the data that we need. We do have some other sources like ADP and such, but the headlines that we're seeing recently, Larry, the layoffs, we've all been talking about them, the AI-driven layoffs. Obviously, we got to be the leader in AI. We can't sit on our on our haunches and just let that go by. But it's coming at some expense, and we don't really know what. It seems to me like we don't have a crystal clear picture of what the labor market looks like at the moment. It's always in the rear view anyway.
I mean, Amazon announced what, 13,000 layoffs? 14,000 layoffs as a result of that.
I mean,
There's a lot of people saying that's just the tip of the. This is just getting started.
But there are. Look, the answer is yes, yes, yes. UPS going to take out almost 50,000 over time. Amazon's numbers, they were talking about maybe up to 30,000 over time. Is it AI? Maybe partly AI, maybe just corporate downsizing that we see periodically. Profits are booming with stocks. But there are 160 million some odd people working. So I don't want to... Now, private payrolls were slowing down before the strike, before the CR. So you're quite right about that. I don't think another quarter point here or there is going to affect that. I mean, if you want to boost private payrolls, you want to create new businesses that will hire new people, right, and put these new AI quantum computing tools to work. What you need is immediate cost expensing, depreciation, and low corporate tax rates and deregulation to, get these government off our back and reduce the paperwork. It's a fiscal issue, and I think that's why Trump's policies are on, they're on mark. Exactly. Another quarter point by the Fed. I don't think
it's the Cudlow dictionary. The word is growth. You can look it up, like the Urban Dictionary. J. Powell.
All right. Before we go to the next video dealing with Trump and Putin, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can get. This is a very high-quality supplement. You can't get anything better in terms of CoQ10. Now, Ubiquinol, what this will do is soak up free radicals because it's an antioxidant. It'll also help the health of your mitochondria, so your energy levels will go up. You'll have more ATP, and Ubiquinol will help to protect your neurons. When you get older, you need to protect your neurons. Super important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Ubiquinol. This stacks really well with the C60. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, and you get $5 off anywhere.
Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired General Jack Keane. General, thanks for being here. Here are the key takeaways from this meeting. U.S. cuts China tariffs by 10%. China agrees to crack down on fentanyl. U.S. suspends new entity list rule and Section 301 tariffs on China. China pauses rare earth export controls, suspends counter tariffs, and agrees to buy U.S. soybeans. As you hear the White House talk about this, the president talk about this, what's your sense of what transpired there?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're seeing something that's a little different in terms of the president's trade policy and the tariff policy undermining that, undermining that. And what's happening here is trade is becoming a part of foreign policy, and this president is exercising that disproportionately to any of his predecessors. And by any definition, you've got to characterize the trip as successful, not just on China, but the trade deals he's made with the other countries. But focusing on China, I mean, he really went in here with his wind at his back, much different than the first administration when he met with President Xi multiple times. Our economy's thriving. Xi, for the first time, is really having some serious headwinds in his 12-year reign as the president. And much more than that, he had two key partners, Iran and Russia. And look what happened here. The United States and Israel set back Iran for years. in the region, with the possibility of enduring peace on the horizon here and normalization with Israel, with the countries in the region, to include the Arab countries, right on the horizon.
If your CFO wasn't up,
Something no one would foresaw a year or so ago, but here we are. And when you look at Russia, I mean, Russia, their economy is tanking and the war is not going well. Let's face it, they're in their fourth year. They haven't taken a major city since 2022. And in the last year plus, they've been conducting this major offensive to take all of the Donbass region in southern Ukraine. And what have they taken in the last year? 0.6% additional territory. That is failure in terms of meeting their objectives, and over 1,000 casualties a day. That is not sustainable over the long haul. And Trump has finally given up on this guy because he talks nice, but he continues the war. And now President Trump is doing what? He's upgunning him, removing weapons restrictions, and he's also putting sanctions on him. I think he's fed up with Putin once and for all. So I think this trip, the reason why he's so successful with China and got everything he asked for, because he's coming in there with a much stronger position, for sure. And she is paying attention to what is happening across the globe and President Trump's influence in being the world's #1 global leader by far. Anything that we saw by comparison to the previous administration is completely different.
He's touting the successes, the trades wins, but the other thing we've talked about a lot is putting pressure on Vladimir Putin. We saw it with the India trade deal on oil and the tariff on India. Chinese imports of Russian oil, 2.2 million barrels per day, more than $62 billion spent. China has really the key to pressuring Russia.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I really would have liked that to been on the agenda. Maybe it was on the agenda. I don't know if it was talked about. I think if it wasn't, any progress would have been made there. We would know about it. I really do think that China clearly matters in sustaining Russia, not just with the oil, but that's primary. But they provide everything short of a weapon system to them to keep them moving. They are their #1 supplier in keeping Putin in the war and compensating for the shortfalls he has in his defense industrial base. And we're going to have to deal with China when it pertains to support for Russia at some point here.
Yeah, let me quickly ask you about this U.S. nuclear testing. Last test the U.S. did was 1992. Why do you think we're starting again?
You know, I can only speculate here, but it's been known for a number of years, Brad. I mean, the 3 countries that are testing openly nuclear weapons are India, Pakistan, and North Korea. We have suspected for years, and likely Trump took a briefing before he went on this trip, that China and Russia have been secretly testing nuclear warheads. And likely the president has a pretty good fidelity on what that is, and if that actually has been taking place. And that may have been on his mind, knowing that reality. I'm only speculating as to why he wants to resume that testing. Because he wants to shut them down. This isn't, he doesn't want to escalate. As you well know, he wants to reduce the number of nuclear weapons we have while China is expanding and trying to catch us and go past us. He would like to get into a deal with China, Russia, and the United States sitting down around a table and let's reduce the number of nuclear weapons. Russia's increasing theirs because they've got tactical nuclear weapons now, because they broke part with the IMF treaty that Reagan established, and Xi is on the march with modernized nuclear weapons, and his desire is to go right past what Russia and the United States have. And when you're looking at you got to look at the both of them as being adversaries of ours and combine their nuclear weapons together is the issue for the United States in dealing with this. And it's no wonder the president wants to sit down and have a discussion on bringing this all down to something that's far more reasonable.
General Keane, as always, thank you.
Yeah, great talking to you, Brett.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight Formula. Goodnight Formula will help you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, so you're well rested when you wake up, you're consolidating memory, and you're detoxifying your central nervous system. This is tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. It's very important to take every night so you have a good sleep. By having a regular sleep consistently, you're going to slow down the aging process. Please go to my store and get the Good Night Formula. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, this video we're going to go over is Mamdani struggles to unite a majority of New Yorkers. This was published by Sky News Australia 6 hours ago.
Election underway in the United States right now, and I speak, of course, about the New York City mayoral election where the Democrat socialist Zohran Mamdani is poised to take control of the most important city in America, promising hard-left economics, free bus rides, rent freezes, and government-run grocery stores. Joining me now for the final word ahead of New York's mayoral race election is the New York Post City Hall Bureau Chief Craig McCarthy. Craig, thanks for joining me here on the U.S. Report. Now, a trio of polls your paper has reported show Zohran Mamdani with varying leads over ex-Governor Andrew Cuomo here in the home stretch, ranging from 10 to 25 points. Craig, is there any chance of Andrew Cuomo staging a comeback, a fight back here in the last days of the election?
No, I mean, at this point, listen, the last 3 polls that came out over the last 24 hours showed Zohran Mamdani with, a commanding 12 to 18, 16-point lead in this race. The question with pollsters now isn't about whether Zohran will win or not. It'll be, how much he wins by at this point. There's seemingly nothing that Andrew Cuomo has been able to do over the last few months at this point to even cut into that lead. He's barely been able to break into 30%. Until Eric Adams, who was the sitting mayor, who was running for re-election until he abandoned that bid, dropped out of the race recently.
Tell me, what is the current feeling in New York City ahead of this election? I mean, are people hopeful or optimistic about what Mamdani is promising or what he's promising to bring? Because an awful lot of people I speak to are really, really nervous about what he could do, especially people who lived through the pre-Giuliani era in New York. To have a guy who talks about defunding the police and driving out the tax base seems like it's a potential disaster.
Well, at this point, voters are split. He hasn't been able to coalesce a majority of New Yorkers behind him. A poll that came out the other day from the right-leaning Manhattan Institute, pointed out that a lot of his principles, a lot of his proposals, the free buses, the city-run food stores, aside from universal child care, most of these things don't poll well with the majority of people. And the business community is obviously very nervous about this because he's proposed a tax on the wealthiest and the corporations. And the real estate community is a lot worried about him because of his pledges to freeze the rent in something we have in New York City that are rent stabilized apartments. So there's a little bit of a shift here, but Democrats have been coalescing behind him with the establishment coming out from people like Kathy Hochul or Keem Jeffries begrudgingly endorsing him over the last little bit, who are some of the top Democrats in the state, also DC.
And what about some of these cultural issues around him? I mean, your paper, I believe, reported that his mother, Zohran Mamdani's own mother, who herself is quite a prominent filmmaker, said that she thinks of her son as not an American at all, her words, and that, quote, he thinks of himself as a Ugandan and an Indian. And others have seized on his comments about 9/11 and talking about his aunt, who wasn't actually his aunt, who said she felt uncomfortable taking the train after 9/11 because she wore a hijab. Well, I mean, I'm glad he identified who the real victims of that terror attack was. But how is all this going down?
I think what we're seeing right now in New York City when it comes to that is a shift in the electorate and a shift of the Democrat and the base here, right? So we're talking about somebody who is an immigrant, who his mother said he didn't feel American at that time. This interview was 2013. He came to this country when he was 7. He became a U.S. citizen in 2018. But there's been this shift, and what Andrew Cuomo, the things you're bringing up about the things you're bringing up about 9/11, obviously it being in New York City, a lot of these things have been shifting in the sense of those are taxes trying to land on them, which would traditionally, in the same thing coming with anti-Semitism, right? So a lot of these things have come up with that. The shift of the base, the big blocks of voters in here are no longer the Jewish vote and the black vote, and more of the Indian and the Chinese vote in New York City. It's just a shifting demographic right now. And I think a lot of these things have been from a lot of attacks and all these kind of political maneuvering that have tried to create some fear, some bad negative press behind it to try to get support to Andrew Cuomo. But as I was saying, none of it has really moved the needle.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating what you're saying about the demographics there and the shifting ethnic demographics of political power in New York. Have the Cuomo people, or the Mamdani foes, I guess, to put it another way, have they made a tactical error here in bringing up cultural attacks that would play well with people who wouldn't vote for Mamdani anyway, instead of focusing on, the real negative effects of defunding the police, which Mamdani's had to run away from, having said 1 million times in the past, from his economics, which the middle and working class would pay the price for, and that sort of campaigning?
Well, I think the problem that they've had with this campaign is, and this is from talking with tons of political experts and people who've run campaigns, is, regardless of what you agree with this policy from Zohran Mamdani, he has run a very hopeful campaign, right? It's not doom and gloom of New York City, everything is horrible. It's New York City is great, we want to make it better. And trying to run a negative campaign against it simply just does not resonate with voters, especially somebody like Andrew Cuomo has been dogged about coming in as coming in from Westchester as a carpetbagger and coming in to try to run the city, because trying to use this as an in to come back into political relevance. And I think that's a big thing with this race. And again, you can even see with Democratic voters. He was on a famous podcast this week, and Andrew Schultz is a comedian. He even said, he's like, I'm not a socialist. I don't agree with all of your policies, nearly any of them. However, you're coming in this with some ideas and some hope and not this doom and gloom, and that's why you're supporting them. So I think and again, that's what I'm saying against with the polls across the city of his ideals and his policies, is they don't have overwhelming support. But Democrats, and in the era that we have with President Trump and the sparring with them, they're looking for somebody who's going to fight for them. And I think that it doesn't even matter a lot of times if they agree with all the policies or even at all.
New York will have a major exodus if Mamdani wins and his social policies start to take hold. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the complete multivitamin. The complete multivitamin has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity, because they're cofactors for those enzymes. By having the proper cofactors, your enzyme shape will conform to a more efficient shape, so your cells will perform better. That's the reason why you need to take a multivitamin. So please go to my store, get this multivitamin, and it's part of the foundation for my anti-aging protocol. And what's that protocol? Take the multivitamin, take the probiotics, that's the foundation. The first pillar is Max 35 or Cleanse to boost up your immune system, C60 to soak up free radicals. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to boost up your immune system. And the fourth pillar, Boomer Boost, to boost up your energy levels and rev up your metabolism. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the complete multivitamin. All right, we're gonna listen to France 24 on their take. Is New York mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani the future of the United States Democrats? Ultra liberals are hijacking the Democratic Party.
Freeze free buses and universal healthcare among his hugely popular campaign promises. Zohran Mamdani's meteoric rise to frontrunner in the New York mayoral election has been propelled by a package of radical policy proposals and fueled by anger over the city's soaring cost of living. Median rents have, for the very first time, exceeded $4,000 a month, more than double the US average. Our correspondents in New York have been catching up with the frontrunner as he hit the pavements in the final days of the campaign.
It's football for all. New York City's Democratic nominee for mayor, Zoran Mamdani, is hosting a five-a-side tournament in Coney Island, Brooklyn. In less than a year, he's gone from unknown Queens Assemblyman to the brightest new star in American politics. Born in Uganda with Indian roots, the 34-year-old is poised to become New York's first Muslim mayor. He's been dubbed the Smiling Socialist.
Why are you hosting a soccer event? What does soccer have to do with socialism?
Soccer is a big part of what so many New Yorkers love about being in this city.
God, I hate that guy. Fucking socialist.
The matches that we go to.
And what message are you sending about affordability?
The name, cost of living crisis. And it speaks to the fact that whether we're talking about eggs or milk or bread, for many New Yorkers, these are things that have become increasingly out of reach. And it's time to both focus on that and use it as an opportunity to meet more New Yorkers who love the same thing.
Mamdani is a democratic socialist. He's part of a new generation of politicians challenging the status quo. He advocates for affordable housing.
I mean, let's get real. Let's get real. Most New Yorkers that are born in New York, all right? Most New Yorkers, they like football, basketball, baseball, hockey. They don't watch soccer.
Schools, free buses and childcare, racial justice and Palestinian rights.
He's shown that you can win a political campaign without capitulating to pressure from Israel and the Israel lobby.
Mamdani represents hope, something pretty exciting. A new shot at changing things in the city. And as you can see, everybody who's here today is really excited. It's mostly the economical part, because living in New York City is really expensive. And he's 34, which, you know, I'm 22. That's the closest to me than other candidates.
But his left-wing policy ideas don't sit well with everyone. US President Donald Trump called him a communist and threatened financial retaliation in New York City if Mamdani wins. Over in Manhattan, Mamdani's main rival, former New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo, is meeting with the city's business leaders and power brokers. Cuomo is warning them of the perils of left-wing policies in the finance capital of America.
I'm a capitalist. This election is the choice between capitalism and socialism.
One area in the city where Cuomo appeared.
Cuomo needs capitalists, and the markets are open in New York. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,872. My projection for year end is 6,850 to 7,000. The VIX is trading at 16. Euro's trading at 115. Oil's trading at $60.93 a barrel. Bitcoin is trading at 110,000, and Japanese yen is trading at 154. So right now, it's pretty much equity rally. Again, you have to remember that the Federal Reserve lowered the rate, the Fed rate, by 25 basis points. So it looks pretty positive for equities. As long as Trump doesn't say something that's crazy with tariffs, we should get pretty close to like 6,950, maybe even 7,000 for the year end for the S&P 500. All right, let's continue.
Have more support than Mamdani is the Upper East Side. This is a wealthy part of Manhattan with a large Jewish population. Early voting figures show older New Yorkers are coming out in force.
He's terribly anti-Semitic and would not be representing the Jewish community. And second of all, his ideas are so ridiculous that it would bankrupt the city, force people to leave.
Here, critics deride Mamdani's socialist policy ideas and view his vocal support for Palestinian rights as dangerous. Mamdani is at pains to explain that he's not anti-Semitic, but rather pro-human rights.
I'm also a Jew and a Zionist, and I want to make very clear, this man is not an anti-Semite. He's going to make sure this is a city government that is protecting everyone,
If elected, Mamdani's promised to represent all New Yorkers.
We're joined now by Lindsay Cormack, Associate Professor of Political Science at the Stevens Institute of Technology. Lindsay, thanks so much for being with us on the program.
Not once. I've been watching this for a while. Not one time have I seen mainstream media say anything about John Locke, the philosopher, that basically said this: life, liberty, and property. And it was the foundations of our founding fathers when we wrote our Constitution, where it was about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was originally right from John Locke, life, liberty, and property. But it was Benjamin Franklin that told Jefferson, you know what? We need to actually think about pursuit of happiness, instead of locking ourselves into just the mundane material world of property. All right? But not once have the pseudo-intellectuals say anything about the Enlightenment. Now, why does Dr. Paul Cottrell say this? Well, Dr. Paul Cottrell is smarter than the talking heads on mainstream media. In addition, Mamdani represents a destruction of the Enlightenment. Mamdani represents Marxism. Mamdani represents the destruction of property rights, which is the cornerstone of our constitutional freedoms. We have a constitutional republic, not a democracy. And the reason? Because mob rule will take away your rights. But when it's endowed by our creator, those rights, and enshrined in a constitution, then the mob can't take them away. So does Mamdani really represent all New Yorkers? Well, sure as hell not the grocery store owners, sure as hell not the property owners. Mamdani is dangerous.
He's got currently more than a 10-point lead in the polls. Is it done deal at this point for Mamdani?
I think it's probably going to be a race for him to win. If you look at the overall registration rates in New York City, 65% of everyone who's registered to vote is registered as a Democrat. So he's got a really big lead just by registration alone.
He says that his policies are going to cost about $10 billion a year. We heard one woman in that report there saying that what he'll actually do is end up bankrupting New York. Independent estimates put the cost at over $100 billion for his policies in the longer term. Are his campaign pledges actually realistic, do you think?
Well, I think they're aspirational, and like any mayor, he's not going to be a dictator that gets everything he wants. He'll have to run through the city council, and his estimates of if it's just $10 billion, that would be very doable. In New York City, the allocation that we have for our budget next year is $116 billion. So I imagine he'll get parts of it. It won't all come immediately, and I don't think we'll be bankrupt because of this.
And what can the party learn more widely about addressing these kind of issues in the US? It's an expensive country. It's not just New York. How big of an issue is this for American voters?
Well, I think he did two things that other people who want to emulate his style could learn from. One is he met people where they're at, and that was mostly online in Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. And in doing that, he got the attention where people are putting it. And the second thing that he did is he's sort of talking about making the word socialism a slur. Because in New York City, we have one of the widest disparities of wealth between our richest and our poorest. And so if he can sort of reanimate the term socialism, that might be something that we see other candidates around the United States take a notice of.
And is he managing to make a connection with older voters? You say there he's very popular online, he's very popular with younger people in New York, but is his message getting through across the board?
Well, it's interesting. I think some older New Yorkers find themselves in sort of a hard decision-making world. A lot of them have experienced different versions of Andrew Cuomo. Curtis Lewa has been on the scene for a very long time, and so there's certainly an interest about who this new young person is who might have a different thing to say. Cuomo does lead with the older voters, but there are some who are skeptical because they've seen how he's governed in the past and they want change.
And does his popularity offer hints as to what perhaps the Democratic Party can do more widely to win back power, or are his policies and is his appeal unique to New York?
I think there's certainly something unique about his story, but there are universal things that other Democrats could learn from. His use of social or anti-social media, whatever you like to call it, has been something where many people who otherwise might not care about politics are interacting with it because they're seeing it in their feed as not something that's a bore or something that's going to be really inflammatory, but really something that there can be joy in. And that joyful outreach might be something that other Democrats would do well to look to.
And how else can they try to reconnect with their traditional base? How do we think that they're going to actually perform in midterm elections? Popularity very low for the party overall across the US.
Well, it's hard to say anything terribly positive about either party right now as we're sitting in day 30 of our government shutdown. But traditionally, the out party does well in the midterms after a president's elected. So I do think Democrats are going to do well, especially in the House. And the way that they can connect with the voters that maybe drifted away for a little bit is to talk about these kitchen issues. The affordability crisis is something that Mamdani as a candidate has really highlighted. And I imagine we're going to see echoes of that throughout the United States as we get into our midterm election seasons.
And how do others in the Democratic Party view his meteoric rise? There are some moderates who haven't yet endorsed him.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And it's been interesting as an observer in New York City, seeing that within the party apparatus here. If you look at some of the web pages that you'll find the candidate Mamdani on, he's critical of Governor Hochul. She did come out and endorse him, though, much earlier than many other moderate Democrats. So I know it's an open discussion within leaders in the party.
And is he alienating, do you think, some within the party with his more radical views, perhaps particularly when it comes to the war in Gaza?
That's always going to be a touchy issue. And so I sort of think whatever stance a candidate takes, there's some risk that there's going to be people who are alienated by that. And that's true whether they have sort of a view that we need to be doing more or doing less, especially in the Middle East.
And he can't actually run as president, but do you think, his personality, the kind of policies he's talking about implementing are threatening Donald Trump in some way? We've seen him come out and compare him to, describe him as a little communist, for example.
Yes, we've seen that sort of disparagement, but we all know that this is something that our president does. And so I don't know that it's particularly a problem for Zohran Mamdani, whichever candidate was going to be.
Can't she just admit that Mamdani is a little communist?
Candidate in New York City, I imagine the president would have an issue with because that person was going to be a Democrat of some form.
And what do you think of those threats that Donald Trump is making, saying that there will be some kind of financial retribution that he's going to dole out to New York if people there do actually elect Mamdani?
Well, I think that actually makes us think about what we're trying to do here as a country, because I don't know anyone who likes to be threatened by their leader for making a free choice in their local elections. So I actually think that that might be something that blows back on Donald Trump in an unfair or a negative way, because people don't like to be told that if you don't vote the way as the person at the top says you should, then there's going to be consequences. Local elections are different than federal elections, and New Yorkers deserve the ability to pick the candidate who they prefer.
And do you think we'll be able to read into then, given that fact, we'll be able to read much into this, no matter which way the election actually does? Will it offer some kind of guide as to how both parties are likely to do in the next elections, in the midterms?
I actually think there's a lot more for Democrats to learn than Republicans. New York City is a very interesting part of the world in the sense that we really don't have a competitive Democrat versus Republican election for most of our races because we have such an overwhelming share of voters who are registered with the Democratic Party. So Democrats could probably do well to look at some of the less
New York is full of liberals. Now, not everybody's a liberal, but the problem is that, oh, they're artists, or they're, some sort of, I call them the New York Times reader. The New York Times reader is always liberal, right? And they're into the arts. But they don't really realize that New York is what it is because of capitalism, not socialism. And it's so funny because even in the fund managers that are trying to accrete funds for their investment house, they don't take a stance. They don't take a stance that they're either a Republican or a Democrat. They always play the fence, right? And if most of their clients are liberal, they'll act liberal. If most of their clients are conservative, then they'll do the conservative play. But the thing is that they're ambivalent or fake, however you want to phrase it. But the thing is that you have these different groups in New York, where you have a small group that's conservative and pro-capitalism, right? Pro-constitution. You have a large group that is socialistic, right? Democratic Party. And within that is a subset that's ultra-liberal. And then you have the ambivalent ones. Now, New York's going to have a problem if they bring in Mamdani.
This race, but I don't know that there's going to be many things for House Republicans or the Senate Republicans are up to take from this one.
But it will be watched closely, do you think, by voters right across the United States? There's something specific about New York that does attract that kind of attention, not just in the US, but right around the world, in fact.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And some of the research that I do is looking at how members of Congress communicate to their constituents. And maybe somewhat surprisingly, there are more members of Congress that do not reside in New York that have talked about Mamdani than the members of Congress in New York itself. And so I do know that there's national attention. We see it in the data. And I imagine there's always going to be attention on New York because it's the largest city that we have in the United States. It's the engine of our economy. And so it's right for people to have sort of a curiosity about what we're doing here.
Lindsay, thanks so much for being with us. That is Lindsay Cormack, Associate Professor of Political Science.
Oh, Professor of Political Science. Pretty sure she's liberal. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the cleanse. This is 30 parts per million, or max 35, which is 35 parts per million. Take a teaspoon a day every day. And what this will do is boost up your immune system. How? You swish it in your mouth, you gargle about 20 seconds, then swallow it. What will happen is that you're improving your oral hygiene and you're maintaining the mucosal barrier and helping the health of your epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. Super important, all right? Be prepared for the fall and the winter season. Now, I've been doing this protocol for over 5 years. I take it every day, all right? If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. And then once you feel better, or everything's all clear, then go back to your maintenance dose. But it's important to boost up that immune system. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Max 35 or the Cleanse. Be prepared for the fall and the winter season. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, now we're going to listen to Chuck Todd about Mamdani. Chuck Todd is a liberal. Chuck Todd.
Day night, Mamdani wins as this socialist, far left progressive, and Cittarelli wins as MAGA adjacent, expanding Donald Trump's bloc in New Jersey. Does that not tell us that the center of the Democratic Party is, dead?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to go that far because there's a cross current in New Jersey, Leland. And in fact, for what it's worth, I've never believed that Cheryl's had as big of a lead as some of the polling has shown. New Jersey has a history of the public polling underpolls Republicans more often. It's a tough state to poll. It's not like an intentional thing, but Shutterelli in the last race, going into the last week, all the public polling had it 7, 8, 9 points, and he only ended up losing by 3 or 4. So I only throw that out there because I think this is a very close race, but I think it's a close race for another reason, which is New Jersey actually is, when it comes to its governors, very much more like, a Michigan, a Kansas, even a Massachusetts that sort of about every 8 years says, you know what, it's time for the other party. And they get a little fatigued. So Murphy's job rating isn't great. Governor Phil Murphy, the term limited Democratic governor there. And I think if she loses, it's more of a reflection on the state and the perception of the state. I'll tell you this, though, on Mamdani. When he first won that nomination, I had a whole bunch of my sort of campaign sources on the left a little paranoid that was going to harm her. I have not heard that as much lately, just for what it's worth.
Interesting. Okay, well, that is a little different than the reporting I've heard, or the reporting I've done, but I hear you.
They're fearful. They're fearful of it certainly in North New Jersey. There's no doubt about it.
I guess, though, there is this shift of the electorate. I think we can all agree on that, right? Working class voters basically shifted, education. You want to say it by education, you want to say it by rural, suburban, urban, whatever. How the yuppies became socialists, this is from the Free Press. Everyone seems to acknowledge, at least nowadays, that working and blue-collar middle class turned to Donald Trump because of the desire to blow up a political and economic system they felt had left them behind. The great irony of the current political moment is that many of the people Trump's base holds most responsible for their declining fortunes, not altogether incorrectly, also increasingly feel left behind in the world they built for themselves. So do we end up now with the socialist and the MAGA types all against the elite cabal, if we want to call it that?
Well, I think that has been what we've seen. I've always the Bernie Sanders primary voter 16 ended up the Donald Trump general election voter in 16, right? And Joe Rogan was with Bernie before he was with Trump. So there's no doubt. And I think we can go back and even say the same argument goes back further, that the same forces that nominated Obama or Clinton, arguably, were part of these same forces inside the Democratic Party that I believe left the Democratic Party when the party went back to Clinton, right? These same Democrats were Obama Democrats, but they were not Obama-Clinton Democrats, if that makes sense. Just in the sense, not all Reagan Democrats went back to the Democratic Party after Reagan left. Some stayed being Republicans, some didn't. Some did go to Bill Clinton, right? So I think that I think we forget that that was a pretty divisive primary in
So
LA.
what you're saying is that this keeps the same group keeps moving back and forth, and it's the fight for that same group.
It's this same group who just wants to. They do want to blow up the system. They said we're going to try we're going to break up there. We're going to have an African American president. Maybe he'll blow up the system. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, we're going to try this billionaire Gilded Age guy from New York. Maybe he'll blow up the system. And we'll see if they're satisfied with this. There are days when I hear Donald Trump talking up the stock market and not talking about the groceries. I think he's walking into where that same group of voters, where you could argue you're starting to see it show itself in Marjorie Taylor Greene. Hey, what are you guys focused overseas for?
Right.
You're supposed to be America first, right? That same group of voters could be up for grabs sooner than we think.
Well, I think the grocery bill voters, right? We have some, soccer mom voters, and you always want to label them. If you want to call it grocery bill voters, those are the ones to watch. Chuck, always fun.
I think you just coined a new political term there. Well done.
All right, you feel free to use it without attribution.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. You can get it in VeggieCap or in the powdered version. By taking the probiotic, you're going to improve your gut biome. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients more efficiently. Your metabolism will improve. You'll reduce leaky gut syndrome. You'll also improve your immune system at the gut level, improve the mucosal lining, improve the communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. You'll be able to sleep better. And by having better sleep, you're going to be able to detoxify your body. especially the central nervous system, consolidate memory, and you'll be well rested. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. This is the foundation. You take it with the multivitamin, and it's a great way to get towards a more robust and a body that has more vitality. So please go to my store and get the probiotics. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right. Chaos. Founder of New York City Bodegas Group resigns after Mamdani. And what happened? This just happened. This just was published.
New Yorkers gearing up for Election Day as brand new Fox News polls reveal that Democrat Zoran Mamdani is still leading the mayor's race. Mamdani getting support from 47% of likely voters, holding a double-digit lead over former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Republican Curtis Sliwa still trailing behind at 15%, but there is still time for the tide to shift before next week's election. Fernando Mateo, co-founder of the United Bodegas of America, resigning after that organization decided to back Mamdani. The group's president announcing that endorsement earlier this week. Watch.
We are proud to stand beside Zoran Mamdani, a candidate who understands the struggle of everyday New Yorkers. Together, we want to build a New York City that is affordable for everyone. One is our concern to be safe in our bodegas, because be safe in our bodegas is not only the bodega, it's about our community.
Here to weigh in is the founder and president of the Bodega and Small Business Group, Frank Marte. Frank, thanks for coming in. Let's pick it up right there with safety. Respond to that endorsement of Mamdani, citing safety as one of the reasons. What do you think is going to happen to safety here in the Big Apple if Mamdani wins?
Well, if Mamdani wins, we're going to have a big problem with the safety, because remember that he was one of the who create the problems that we are facing now with the unsafety. He was one of the ones that supported defund the police, no prosecutor, no press charge to the criminals. So we're gonna have a huge problems. I don't know how my friend got convinced to say that when all of the bodegueros, they feel that they were betrayed by someone that's supposed to represent it, and they know the problem that we have been facing with the public safety. That's our number one concern that we have.
I think you're questioning of why somebody who's a friend of yours in your business, bodega owners, issued an endorsement like that, especially on safety, but also on money, also on the economy. And look at this poll. I think this may be somewhat telling. According to the Fox News poll, 47% of New Yorkers think that Mamdani would do a better job with the cost of living. But Mamdani, I think, is going to raise costs, especially with his brand of socialism that he wants to bring to the city, especially when it comes to city-run grocery stores, because I can't imagine our government here in New York subsidizing grocery stores is going to do anything but raise costs for your customers and impact ultimately your bottom line. And
increase taxes.
Can't buy as much.
Exactly, and that's something that has to fail all the time. And they want to use our tax-paid money to compete with us. So that will even going to be worse for a small business. So if we have Mamdani there, we will disappear as a small business, because what his platform is to destroy the small business, and the New York, it will create a huge chaos in the economies of New York City.
We do these polls and we see all these people voting for Mamdani, but I don't know anybody who's voting for Mamdani individually, personally. When you get out there in your community, what do your community members tell you? Are they voting for Mamdani?
Yes, some of them they say, oh, because with him we're gonna have we're gonna have free stuff. That's the nice music they have to play. And I be telling the people, thanks God, I have to get a lot of people that they are not voting for him, because I said, listen, he cannot do what he's offering. He just want to say that he's offering you so many things, free stuff, because like that you can vote for him, but he won't be able to accomplish what he's saying. He's just gonna bring here a chaos to the New York City.
It's not free to you, Frank. It's not free to you because you're going to ultimately end up paying for it in the end. We appreciate you coming in here, telling us your story, letting the voters know.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc. This will boost up your immune system and also help with your brain function. And vitamin C and magnesium helps with your skin, immune system, and brain function. Take them together. Be prepared for the fall and the winter season. You're going to need this. Boost up that immune system. Use discount 5. All right, let's listen to the Second Cold War by The Hill.
President Donald Trump is asking the Pentagon to begin nuclear tests, the first for the U.S. since 1992. Aside from a Truth Social post announcing the move, the administration has yet to announce further details.
But now it's raising a lot of questions about the escalation of military tensions with countries like China and Russia.
All kidding aside, all right? We do know that during the Cold War, the United States had an arms race against the Soviet Union. In addition, we were concerned, the United States was concerned about communism spreading in other countries, in Asia and also in South America. With Cold War 2.0, we have to worry about communism spreading in California and in New York and in New Jersey, Massachusetts. It's metastasizing all over the country. Brought to you by the ultra-liberal.
To give us some insight into the stakes is Daryl Kimball, Executive Director of the Arms Control Association. Thank you so much for being with us. My pleasure. I really appreciate it. So let's look at the president's announcement, and then we'll play a soundbite, and I'll get your reaction on the other side. So President Trump said, because of other countries' testing programs, I have instructed the Department of War to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis. That process will begin immediately. Here's some sound from the president.
I see them testing. I say, well, they're going to testing as we have to test. I'd like to see a denuclearization because we have so many, and Russia is so Russia's second, and China's third, and China will catch up within 4 or 5 years. I think de-escalation would be they would call it denuclearization would be a tremendous thing.
So there, I guess some would see some issues with de-escalation, but also calling for nuclear weapons testing. What is your take?
Well, that's a very good response and reaction. I mean, the president's announcement was extremely surprising. There have been no signs that he was intending to do this. The United States has not conducted a nuclear explosive test at the Nevada test site since September 23rd, 1992. We've developed a very sophisticated, well-financed stockpile stewardship program to maintain the reliability of the 7 warhead type state arsenal without nuclear explosive testing. Every nuclear weapons lab director has certified that this program is working. So there's no technical reason to resume nuclear testing to figure out if there's a problem that needs to be fixed. Nuclear weapons historically were used to develop new types of nuclear weapons to proof test the warhead designs. We conducted 1,030 over the course of the nuclear age. So there's no need to do this for military purposes either. So what the president just said is incorrect in a couple ways, but he's clearly suggesting that because I think other countries are doing this nuclear testing, we need to do it too. Not because there's a military imbalance, it's just for signaling. The fact is, no other country is conducting nuclear test explosions. North Korea is the only country that's done it in the 21st century. So I think he's misinformed. I think the approach is incoherent. I mean, on one hand, he's made some very positive remarks. He keeps saying he wants denuclearization talks with Russia and China. The U.S. and Russia have a massive arsenal. The last treaty limiting the arsenals, the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, is going to expire in less than 100 days. And he's said, I think we should keep those limits on. Putin has proposed keeping the limits on for a year. So I think there's a zigzagging here going on, a contradiction between wanting denuclearization and then escalating by proposing a resumption of testing. I mean, the last thing I'd say is since we have conducted so many nuclear test explosions, we understand more about these U.S. nuclear warheads than ever before. Other states who have not tested as much would benefit if the door to nuclear testing is opened again. And, this would be a 180-degree shift in U.S. behavior. I think it would create a chain reaction of testing by North Korea, certainly Russia, maybe China, and it would be a body blow to the global nuclear non-proliferation system. So Congress has got to ask some damn hard questions. There's going to be opposition to this. The Nevada delegation is going to introduce legislation today to prohibit any such resumption of testing. And the people of Nevada already are on record stating that they don't want to see this happen again. This had happened about 50, 60 miles outside of Las Vegas. There was a poll last year of Nevadans about this. 73% Republicans and Democrats said they would oppose the resumption of nuclear testing.
So let's go back to the other countries that this would open the door to, because we are the biggest military on earth. We're still a country where everybody else seems to follow in our footsteps. What does that look like to you in terms of global insecurity? What does that do? How do you see it?
Well, today, the risk of nuclear conflict is higher than it has been at any point since the end of the Cold War. We've got nuclear flashpoints between India and Pakistan on the Korean Peninsula, between the U.S. and China over Taiwan. We've seen Putin threatening nuclear use over the war in Ukraine. So risks are growing, and as I said, we're on the cusp of a buildup of U.S. and Russian arsenals if they don't negotiate new constraints. So to add to all of this, the president, by suggesting we should resume nuclear testing, would be putting even greater stress on these problems. And he would be, as I said, opening the door for the North Koreans to resume testing, which can only help them develop new types of warheads, warheads that are designed to hit the United States and South Korea and Japan. And he would lead Vladimir Putin to mirror U.S. behavior by resuming Russian nuclear testing, and they're developing some exotic new delivery systems, but not yet new types of warheads. So this would be, a terrible own goal, to use a soccer analogy. And I just think he is misinformed and maybe confused about how all this will play out.
So when I hear nuclear weapons testing, I think about all the old footage that we've seen, the ocean, big mushroom cloud rising up upon the horizon. Are we talking about like detonating nuclear weapons? What does it mean to test a nuclear weapon?
Good question. So the detonation of a nuclear weapon means you're producing a chain reaction of release of nuclear energy. That is what a nuclear test explosion is. One question is how large is the blast? Full-scale nuclear test explosions were conducted underground at the Nevada test site in Russia, China, other countries, largely contained. There were some radioactive leaks. It would take the United States some 18 to 36 months, maybe longer, to put the equipment back in. It would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to do this in Nevada again. It would be a big operation. Now, there are other kinds of much lower yield nuclear test explosions that could be done at extremely small scale. They would still be technically a release of energy due to a chain reaction. Those could be done in a specialized room the size of the studio. Why? But the United States is not doing that today, nor do we believe Russia or China or other countries are. But that may be the other kind of test that Trump has been told that we could conduct. Now, that kind of nuclear test explosion doesn't actually yield much information that's useful for the U.S. arsenal. That's a scientifically, technically validated opinion. So that kind of test doesn't help us develop a new warhead or validate the program any better than our what are called subcritical nuclear experiments that the U.S. conducts about every 6 to 9 months in Nevada to make sure that the existing warheads in the arsenal are performing as designed.
Let me go back to the very beginning, because the president said he wanted to do testing on an equal basis.
Yeah.
And that seemed to infer on delivery systems like Russia is doing.
Yeah, well, lots of us were a bit perplexed about what he meant because just recently the Russians have conducted a couple of flight tests of a couple of new exotic systems. The U.S. and Russia conduct regular tests of their delivery systems, their intercontinental ballistic missiles. But as it turns out, he's talking about nuclear weapons testing. Now, when he says on an equal basis, that implies, and then in that later clip, he said that I think that other countries are conducting nuclear tests. Well, there is no evidence that Russia or North Korea has conducted nuclear test explosions as defined by the 1996 Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, which, by the way, we signed in 1996. We haven't ratified it. Russia has signed. China has signed. 187 other states have signed. That is the global norm. And so Trump would here, in this case, if he succeeds, and I don't think he will in the end, be breaking yet another norm, but this one relating to global nuclear security.
All right. Derek Kimball with the Arms Control Association. Derek, we appreciate the insight tonight. Thank you so much.
Mankind is rapidly getting to the point where we may go extinct. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley before you go extinct. Now, heirloom barley is a micronutrient protein made from heirloom barley. You can't get this type of barley at the regular store. This is very special stuff that you should be taking every day. And what does it do? It brings down inflammation, detoxifies your body, and also soaks up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. Now, this is a month's supply. It's a powder. It's a high-density protein micronutrient. And how you take this is that you mix it with soft foods like hummus or applesauce or maybe even yogurt and take it every day. You can also mix it with just filtered water. You can put it in a smoothie. You can mix it with your food or even just with milk. But take it every day. And by detoxifying your body and bringing down inflammation and soaking up those free radicals, you're helping your immune system, your endocrine system, your brain function, even your cardiovascular health, because you're bringing down inflammation and reducing plaque formation. So please go to my store and get the heirloom barley. Very high quality, and take it every day. Collagen. This is a dual purpose supplement. It's a month's supply. It's also in a powder. You take it the same way as the heirloom barley. And you can stack the two together if you want. That's what I do. Now, collagen can help with your skin, your hair, and your nails, your cartilage, your bone density, your musculature. So it behooves you to take this. Now, do some resistance training and get the max benefits. Please go to my store and get the collagen. The typical amino acid profile is shown on the screen here. Very high quality collagen. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, now what we're going to do is go to Fox Business, talking about a significant inflection point coming for Democrats in Shutdown next week. All right, let's see here. And this was published about 40 minutes ago.
Roger Marshall. Senator, it's great to see you. We so appreciate you joining us. What is your response to the president saying, get rid of the filibuster and reopen government?
Well, good morning, Maria. I never really ever seriously considered ending the filibuster until this very, very last week. There's no doubt ending the filibuster allows us to open the government. It allows us to plow through President Trump's agenda, a whole lot of great things. And the biggest argument to get rid of it is that, look, the Democrats are going to do it anyway. The next time the Democrats are controlling the Senate, they're going to do it anyway. But we got to be careful what we wish for here. If we do this, the next time the Democrats are in power and they control all three levers, they're going to, nuke the Supreme Court. They're going to pack the Supreme Court. They're going to make Puerto Rico the District of Columbia State. They're going to give us Medicaid for all. So this will be a hot debate right now. To me, it's not clear, but I'm very willing to have this debate now.
Wow. Well, the fact that we're on day 31 And we're now actually seeing impact to the broader economy. I mean, Vice President J.D. Vance and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy are warning of a travel disaster the longer the doors stay closed. You know, we are looking at air traffic control and TSA agents working without pay. Some of them have just started to call in sick. They don't want to work without pay, but they also can't work without pay. They need to find another income. So they have to take off the job that's not paying them. Doesn't this lead to an economic problem down the road, a bigger economic problem than we expected now that we're on day 31?
Well, Maria, certainly we are starting to feel this. We are at an inflection point. The air traffic control folks, the TSA, they blocked it. They missed their second paycheck now. We had about a 2-hour delay. All the flights were delayed 2 hours yesterday out of DCA. When the transportation system is not working right, it certainly does have a huge impact on the economy as well. So, we don't miss the government until we miss them. We're just about there where really things are not going very well. I think it is time for the Democrats to come across the aisle and vote yes on it. 13 times Republicans have voted yes. We stay united. The reason we're staying firm is to balance the budget, which is, I think, the biggest problem this country faces. So it's we're stuck in this neutral right now. It's a tough place to be in.
I mean, you've tried 13 times, as John Thune said on the Senate floor the other night. 13 times the Democrats voted against it. We're now at day 31. We are actually seeing massive snarls in air traffic. And if people start canceling on the trips going into the busy holiday season, that is going to have a direct impact on the economy. What other choice do you have other than do the nuclear option, get rid of the filibuster, and reopen this government?
Well, Marie, the option is to keep negotiating and go through what we call regular order. Senator Susan Collins has, I think, 8 of the 12 buckets of funding for the government done. The Democrats need to come back to the table and negotiate with us once again. But I think they're starting to feel the pain. They're spinning on their heads like tops right now. I think that next week there's going to be a significant inflection point. They get these governor's races behind them. They can plant the flag. They were going to win them anyway, but they've got as President Trump said, they've got Trump derangement syndrome. They've got a gold card now for Trump derangement syndrome going on right now. This is a political shutdown. Is being run by the legacy media along with the far left part of the Democrat Party.
Well, that's another thing that you mentioned. I mean, the media. I mean, once again, the media is going along with the talking points and not holding anybody to account, except on that C-SPAN clip that we just showed. She did hold her to account. She tried to get out of the fact that they already voted for the same clean CR earlier in the fall. Look. All of this in the face of House Oversight Republicans urging the Department of Justice to probe former President Biden's auto pen use. After the report of the investigation, Committee Chairman James Comer told me that executive action signed via auto pen should be null and void. I want to get your take on this because House Republicans now are calling for the impeachment of Judge James Boasberg after new FBI files revealed that former special counsel Jack Smith called AT&T, Verizon. He requested all the records and the communications of sitting lawmakers related to more than 430 individual and organizations who are Republican, all aimed at Republicans. I spoke with Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, yesterday about the major telecom companies releasing the senator's phone records. Watch this. Is that normal protocol that a major telecom company is going to give up everybody's information on their phone, even if including a sitting senator?
Yeah, this is how the FBI operated, and they don't tell the person who's being targeted until after the fact, until months or years later. This is how pervasive it was, and again, it's why I think it's important we dig into all this. And frankly, I think it's important that when we find individuals who are part of this entire broader operation of weaponizing the government against your political foes, against your political enemies, I think it's why we hold them accountable.
Now, we now know that AT&T ultimately declined to comply with the subpoena for Ted Cruz's phone records based on what AT&T said were protections provided through the speech and debate clause in Article 1 of the Constitution. However, However, Verizon gave up the information we're told by Chuck Grassley. Your reaction to this, Senator?
Well, Maria, well, shame on Verizon. But I think the Supreme Court has something to do with it, that they can do about this. Let's go back to Russia, and the FISA judges involved with that. Those people should be disciplined and kicked off the court as well. I think that the Supreme Court can be much stronger here and manage the courts and say, look, these people are not fit to serve. The judges involved with this need to be reprimanded along with the FBI, whoever was involved with it as well. I got faith that Kash Patel is going to discipline the people in the FBI. But the question is, how do we get at these judges? I think the Supreme Court has a role, and perhaps indeed Congress should do this as well. Let's impeach one of those judges and then set the standard, set the stage that'll be so they don't do it in the future.
Well, I mean, how does a judge order a telecom company to give up the phone records of their political opponent? How, the lowest levels that they will go to actually take down their political enemies, it's just extraordinary to me. It really is. And I wonder, and by the way, there's also evidence here from Chuck Grassley that the judge told these companies, don't tell Senator Cruz that we're asking. Don't tell Bill Hagerty that we're asking, Marsha Blackburn, all of your colleagues. Were you also tracked?
Maria, we're still going through the list. I guess there's 179 members now. I was not one part of the original 8 or 9, but I know they were after another 179 as well. But the Democrats invented lawfare. The FBI, once upon a time, the most respected law program in the world, and here we are today having this discussion. It just makes my stomach turn. Again, I think this is part of this Trump derangement syndrome, but let's go after the agents, let's go after the judges that participated in this, and Verizon obviously has some questions to answer as well. It's probably time to impeach one of these judges.
Wow, incredible. We're going to be watching your work, Senator. Thanks very much for being here this morning. We will be watching this government shutdown. Real quick, what are the odds government opens next week, do you think, Senator?
Oh my gosh. Let's go 55%. 55%.
All right, thank you so much. We will see you soon.
Before we agree that a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, I'm going to need to know a little more about these birds.
Are you struggling in discrete math? Do you have a hard time understanding your instructor? Do you wish there was a simpler way? I get it. It's frustrating. You go to class expecting answers only to walk away with more questions. And because your teacher and your textbooks skip those important in-between steps, you lose valuable study time, Googling homework problems, desperately searching for the things you're missing. You don't have time for that, and it doesn't have to be this way. Hi, I'm Jen, founder of CAP Workshop, and I've helped thousands of students learn discrete math over the past 15 years. I'm a licensed teacher, and I've taken my classroom online, using detailed step-by-step instructions so you'll learn the how-to along with the ever-important why for all major concepts taught in a discrete math class. And I'm so proud to help students like Scott, who likes how CAP Workshop walks through every step of the problem with a detailed explanation of how and why to get the result. And Jack, who enjoys that complex topics are explained in simple language anyone can understand. And Marinette, who likes the fact that everything I need is on one website and I can easily search topics I need to brush up on. So here's what you can expect. My course follows a standard curriculum where I go through concepts starting from the basics, so you never feel like you're missing something or you need to go look it up elsewhere. I use a step-by-step approach that's easy to understand using countless examples so you can solve and analyze any problem. Plus, my courses are available 24/7 online, and my video library contains over 450 lessons specifically designed to replace your in-class lectures. And you'll get access to all 12 courses, including algebra, geometry, pre-calculus, including trig and math analysis, calculus 1, 2, and 3, statistics and probability, discrete math, linear algebra, and differential equations. So you'll always be able to go back and brush up on topics you might have missed elsewhere. And with over 1,000 practice problems, you'll be able to confidently handle any quiz, homework, or test question thrown your way. So if you're looking to gain a better understanding, prepare for an upcoming class, or you simply need a refresher, CAP Workshop has the step-by-step you need. With a 30-day money-back guarantee, why not give it a shot? Click here and join thousands of students saving their grade with CAP Workshop, and I'll see you on the inside.
It actually worries me a great deal because I think it's not just the base got worse over the last number.
I want to start with oil because it's higher. Of course, the U.S. plans to strike military targets in OPEC producer Venezuela. Brent, this is the international benchmark, is up 0.2% right now. Big tech that's fueling the gains that we are seeing today. Amazon, the best performing stock in the S&P 500, delivering blowout results after the close of regular trading last night. NVIDIA unveiling new partnerships with South Korea's biggest firms. So this extends the global push to expand AI infrastructure. Real quick, looking at shares of Reddit right now, they delivered better than expected forecast for fourth quarter sales. This looks like the company's advertising business is going to continue to grow at a pretty steady clip. This comes a year and a half after the initial public offering. Right now, the share is just about 17%. S&P 500, that's...
All right, so the S&P 500 is at 6,849. VIX is trading just under 17 right now. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. This will help you to control your lipid profile and bring down systemic inflammation, and that way you're reducing the chances of plaque buildup. Digestive enzyme complex will help to break up proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids and reduce the load on your pancreas. Super important for pancreatic health. And vitamin B complex, the first 4 B vitamins helps the health of your mitochondria, and that they are involved in the electron transport chain, so you have more ATP, so you'll have more energy. The B vitamin complex helps with cellular metabolism, and B12 helps to protect neurons. Super important once you turn 40 years of age or older. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg.
We had actually a fascinating discussion the other day. Is the loss of jobs from AI, should that happen? Yeah, it's going to increase productivity, but from a political perspective, does it result in a new wave of populism, one that was generated initially by the World Trade Agreements right
by
now?
globalization?
Yeah.
Good question. I don't know. That's a good point. John Tucker, we will ponder that for the rest of today. We will. And eternity. Hey, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Scarlett Fu, Paul Smee, live with you here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube. Let's get to our next guest. This has been interesting. David Traynor, Chief Executive Officer of New Constructs. He's based down in Nashville, Tennessee, which we'll discuss later. That's a scam. I need to get away from New York City. David, tell us what you do at New Constructs, because I think our paths crossed back in the day at Credit Suisse First Boston Equity Research.
Yeah, the good old days back during the tech bubble. At New Constructs, thanks for having me on, by the way. Good to see you this morning. What we do is actually really pretty unique. We built an AI that actually scans through all of the filings, especially footnotes, and produces what is a now proven superior signal for buying stocks. And when I say proven, I mean it's proven by the performance of the live traded Bloomberg indices that dramatically outperform the market based on our research, and in particular, our measure of core earnings. And we provide that data to quant funds, advisors, and we also have an agent that we are launching with Google Cloud that's based on these insights. So it's a very different AI agent for investing, in that all the other agents really focus on pulling together data and building models. We jump straight to the insights. We can tell you which stocks are most likely to miss earnings, which stocks are likely to outperform because they have better earnings than the market understands. And all that, of course, backed by the fact that we've got real-world alpha in the indices.
Okay, so David, share with us some of your insights. What surprised you the most this earnings season, especially as it relates to what we were just talking about, AI and AI spending?
Yeah, the AI narrative is everything these days, and I think what we're going to see here is a more attrition, because we all know they're spending billions and billions and billions. And some are going to be able to afford it better than others, and the ability to afford it is going to be based on two things: how profitable is their existing business, so how much can it subsidize this huge spend, and then who can realize a return first. And when I look at who can realize a return first and monetize it first, that's much tougher to predict. I like Google's approach because it's a little more agnostic. They're not necessarily tied to any one particular model or way of doing things. But besides that, it's kind of a toss-up of who's going to be the best and who's going to win at that. At this point in time, I don't think we know. But when we look at who's got the money, who can show us the money to sort of really continue to spend, top of that list in terms of cash flow, if you got NVIDIA, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Meta to a lesser extent, but the one company that doesn't make nearly as much money as people think is Amazon. Their free cash flow has been negative to the tune of 30 or 40 billion for several years.
So how do you look at David? How differently do you look at financial statements or financial analysis that may be different from what traditional, looking at the, EPS and cash flow and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's just a more comprehensive approach. It's what Warren Buffett has always said people should do. It's what his mentor Ben Graham and all of sort of the old school people who like to sort of roll up their sleeves and read the 10K or the annual report from cover to cover. That's what I did when I was on Wall Street. But I saw that there was ways to get technology to do it better. And it's taken us 20 years to perfect it, to get it right. I mean, it's not easy. That's the thing that people often misunderstand about AI. To really get it to work, you've got to have a perfect data set. You have a good ontology, all these kinds of things we don't see anyplace else. But yeah, the answer is that we're just doing a more comprehensive job. We're looking in all the dark corners at most.
Thing when it comes to arbitrage, being able to find important information that might give insight on how companies may perform. As more people use the tool, that arbitrage of information starts to nullify itself. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the resveratrol. Resveratrol will help with youthful gene expression and get rid of cells that are in senescence. Super important for an anti-aging protocol. Resveratrol also helps the health of your mitochondria, so you'll have more energy. This stacks well with C60, Clarity Factor, Ubiquinol, and NAD+. Clarity Factor gets rid of brain fog, allows you to concentrate. And over time, this will improve your neuroplasticity, so you are thinking faster and your memory will improve. Please go to my store and get the Clarity Factor. Take it every day so you can concentrate on tasks at home and at work or in school. And if you're 40 years of age or older, your gene expression for building muscle starts to decline. Take Myotrol and do resistance training. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. Myotrol will also help with the health of your mitochondria, so you have the energy to maintain your muscle. This is super important to slow down the aging process. Please go to my store and get the Myotrol.
And Chevron, as well as bringing Vince Piazzi. He covers all the big oil companies for Bloomberg Intelligence. Hey, Vince, I got WTI crude oil at $60 a barrel. I watch Landman. I know about the oil and gas business. I know they're not happy at $60 a barrel. What did you see out of the big energy companies today?
Well, what I did see is impressive upstream results. If I take a look at
that Zoom thing, that looks like a frozen Zoom thing.
That Zoom thing's not working right now.
We're a technology company.
I thought we would be better than this. I think Zoom is better than this, but in any case, you watched Landman.
Yes.
That's the Billy Bob Thornton show?
Yes. And season 2 is coming in a matter of weeks. Cannot wait.
Was there a price of oil in the show?
Yes. $76. That's what they say the optimal price is.
Oh.
Nice fat profit margins, but it doesn't put a price at the pump that gets me and you and other consumers.
Yeah, I was like, that's nowhere close to what we're at right now.
Exactly. So, but BNEF, that's the folks at Bloomberg that really just look exclusively at the energy business and the transition to clean energy. They say the cost of production, the average cost of production for U.S. shale producers is about $55 a barrel. So it's 60, it's kind of tight.
Right. I mean, they're not completely losing out, but it's not what they want it to be at.
No, but what we've seen from the energy companies over the last several years is they've become pretty, they're disciplined, I guess is the word.
Chevron's disciplined, for sure.
I mean, it used to be in the old days, you get oil at $70, $80, $90 a barrel, you start drill, baby, drill, because you can make a lot of money. They're not doing that as much these days, and that's because they're trying to be better for their shareholders and their bondholders, and we're going to try to generate returns as opposed to just drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, I'm really curious to get Vince's take when he rejoins us on how Chevron and Exxon have really taken different paths in this kind of environment where there's a lot of oil, and like you said, oil prices can't get past 67, 68 because they've chosen very, very different philosophies on how to move forward.
Yeah, and I've been reading just in the last several weeks about the potential of maybe we're in an oil glut on a global basis in terms of oil. We've got OPEC kind of dialing back some of the cuts they had put in over the last several years. So
yeah, they just want market share.
They want market share. The U.S. is a net exporter, and our production seems to be pretty steady. And if the economy is slowing down, that's less demand, and there you go.
Well, today we do have oil prices somewhat higher. They erased their losses, but if you look at just the percentage gain, 0.2% for WTI, it's not massive. There was this report that the U.S. is looking to attack military fixtures in Venezuela, which is, of course, an OPEC producer.
Right.
So that could be really disruptive to the business of refinery on the U.S. Gulf Coast, and they rely on Venezuelan heavy crude.
Yeah, but I was just looking at the results from ExxonMobil, the results from Chevron. They've been acquiring some assets as well over the past couple of years, and there's been some M&A in that business looking for proven reserves. I don't think they would necessarily want to go out in the middle of some ocean somewhere and start drilling. I don't think they have the appetite for that these days. So if I can buy reserves or just consolidate maybe some shale ownership, that seems to be that's kind of where I think they're focused.
Yeah, ExxonMobil a lot more aggressive when it comes to acquisitions. It spent $2.4 billion on what it calls growth acquisitions and says it wants to be ready to capitalize on any kind of significant upturn in prices. And, there was some talk that maybe that could come as soon as next year.
I'm going to pivot over to MSNBC talking about how there's only 28% of Americans that support the ballroom.
The Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll we were talking about earlier also found a majority of Americans do not support President Trump's ballroom at the White House. 56% oppose the project.
That coming.
Only 28% of Americans support that expensive new ballroom. 16% not sure yet.
Can I ask a question, Willie? Who is that 28%?
They love it.
Are these like MAGA people that are like having trouble like paying their car loans and paying their healthcare costs, and they're going, oh, I love the idea of the president deciding in the middle of this crisis and government shutdown to tear down half of the White House and put up a Marie Antoinette memorial ballroom. I mean, who are those 28%?
People ride or dies with them.
But the thing is did they inform the person that was taking the poll that it's 100% paid for by private donors, or part of it's being paid for by Trump? That there's no public money that's going into this? This changes no spending by the government. What the hell? It means nothing. It means nothing in terms of deficit or debt or anything like that. Once again, MSNBC, Orange Man bad, he must do everything wrong.
When the Washington Post calls, you say, I'm with him. I'm with him. Independents, by the way, overwhelmingly against the ballroom. 61% of them. Those people vote a lot. They oppose that addition to the White House. So, well, not a huge surprise there, but just now we see it in the numbers.
Yeah, and Sam Stein, I guess the question is, why? Again, with everything that's going on right now, is there no Republican that can
go over to the White House and say, Mr. President, you're really not helping matters here.
Well, hold on 1 second. Let's wait and see what the polls look like after folks see the gold trimmings.
Yeah,
and the
true.
chandeliers. They haven't seen the final product. Okay? That's premature.
That is true. That is true. And maybe if they hold up their insurance premiums to the gold chandelier, maybe they see like a secret message in their lottery numbers. I don't know.
Honestly, this has been kind of mind-blowing to me. I mean, the metaphor, obviously, of tearing down the White House is one thing, but, the building of a structure that's going to dwarf the White House and to have it financed by the biggest corporations in the world and have it, decked out in gold and dangle the possibility that it's going to be the Donald J. Trump ballroom. I mean, this isn't like genius stuff to realize that this is going to backfire on you. But Susan, I mean, you've been writing about East Wing and the White House.
And they don't tell you that, that the White House and the wings go into the ground, and there's multiple stories. These people, I mean, I can't stand MSNBC. They're a bunch of liberals. But these are the wine and cheese fucking Democrats that think they're so fucking smart, but yet we're now $38 trillion in debt because of Keynesian economics, brought to you by the stupid liberal.
The nostalgia that people actually feel for the institution and the building itself. Speak a little bit to that. I mean, just like voters look at this and like, wait a second, they're tearing history away from us.
The pictures of that backhoe were pretty dramatic, tearing down one side of the White House. Every American who's gone on a White House tour has walked through the East Wing, down that long hallway with the wood paneling and the beautiful portraits. Right. It's something that not just people who go to state dinners have experienced. And it was at odds with what President Trump said this ballroom would be. He said it would be next to the East Wing, not replacing the East Wing. And he depicted it as something that would be a little less dominating than we think it's going to be. The number in that Washington Post poll that interests me the most, Republicans who support the ballroom, 62%. Now that may sound like a lot, but for asking Republicans if they support something Donald Trump has done, the number to be only 62% is something we haven't seen on any other issue that he's been associated with.
Yeah, I mean, and John, I mean, it is important for us to say that the president has denied that he's going to call it the Donald J. Trump. You believe that? But, he also said he was not going to touch the existing structure. I want to show those numbers again of independence, because again, all of this, we're doing this for a reason. All of this meshes together. Whether you're a New Jersey voter, whether you're a Virginia voter, whether you're voting out in California, whether you're a New York voter, you look at these independents, only 17%. You just don't see numbers this low. Support the president just completely obliterating the East Wing of the White House. And again, history there, incredible history in the East Wing, but obliterating it, and then, the proposed grand golden lined ballroom, the tone may be a little long.
Yeah, President Trump has a challenging relationship with the truth, but I would argue that perhaps one of his biggest lies ever would be that he would not name the ballroom after himself. In fact, we reported in last week or so, we started talking about what kind of gold font might use for the Donald J. Trump ballroom. But no, it's the timing of this is everything else. It's to do it in the middle of a shutdown, to see the people about the nature of the project and the scope of it, to just tear it down. And first of all, as costs still high, inflation is still up, and the government is shut down. And to do this, it's to provide Democrats with literally an on-the-nose metaphor of what you're doing as president by tearing down half of the people's house. And if there might have been a way. There have been projects at the White House before. You go through the process, you take time, you bring in experts. Okay.
First of all, half of the White House. All right, you have the White House. Even if you assume that there's nothing below ground, which there are multiple stories below ground. Let's just assume that you have that there's nothing below ground. You have the White House. You have the White House proper, the West Wing and the East Wing. All right? In terms of not volume, but overall square footage of the land, not of the stories, but of the land, it's roughly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, roughly. All right? If you take out the East Wing, it's not half of the White House. It's 1/3 of the White House. And oh, by the way, there's multiple stories below ground. So it's less than 1/3. It's probably around 1/6, maybe 1/5. So they can't do math either. So they're a wine and cheese Democrat that drives up the inflation, drives up debt, loves Keynes, loves to just print more money, issue more debt, create more social programs that are inefficient and makes us less productive, and they can't even do math. Oh, they're lawyers. Oh, they're lawyers. They went to law school. So they weren't engineers. They couldn't do the math. So they became a lawyer.
And there are people that are saying, you know, if he had done it the right way, if he had talked to others, there'd be a lot of people who say, you know what, maybe it's a good idea when the president of France comes over, that we don't take him out and have to set up a tent to have a steak dinner. He could have gotten support for this. He actually could have gotten support. If he had done something that he doesn't like doing, that is actually work with other people and set up a ballroom that's not grotesquely out of proportion with the rest of the White House, and to keep the East Wing where it is. This could have easily been done. You just didn't do it that way, really. And again, it's all about timing. You look at the government shutdown, of course. You look at the right track, wrong track numbers. I mean, they're really bad and upside down for the president. And you look at the president's standing on the economy, it's lower than it's ever been, like first term or second term. If you look at the 5 polls that came out this past week, I think they average, you know, in the mid to high 30s. So the wrong time to be tearing down the East Wing of the White House and proposing the grand ballroom that many people believe will be the Donald J. Trump grand ballroom.
And no average American will ever see the inside of that ballroom. No average American will sit on that new Mar-a-Lago style patio that was the Rose Garden. He's creating a country club for the...
No average American, but yet if you buy a ticket, you do a White House tour, you'll probably see it. Once again, a journalist and lawyers don't know jack shit.
To come and visit him. Another concerning number for this White House this week, new numbers among young voters. They made some progress. They got young men to come for him. Young people in this country, it is a struggle. We don't talk about it enough. It's hard to find a job, first of all. You can't buy a house until you're 40 years old or whatever the average age is now. There's real struggle, and young people don't see a government that's helping them get through that. So a lot of
job prospects for new grads and individuals coming out of high school, not very good. It's high unemployment in that cohort group. Definitely, that's a problem. And the cost of housing is extremely high. So being able to purchase that first home is more difficult. But if you move farther away from the cities and more into suburbia and the outskirts of suburbia, near the edge of the urban area, you know what? You couldn't afford a home. And it may behoove you to do that because you buy in, and as the urban sprawl starts to move out 20 years later, you probably have doubled your money. Why do you have to live in New York? You don't. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Boomer Boost. The Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It's a very comprehensive compound profile. This will help multiple systems, your cardiovascular health, brain function, musculature, rev up your metabolism, and boost up energy levels. So please go to my store and get the Boomer Boost. Take it every day. This is a month's supply. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with just milk. But take it every day, and you will notice within 72 hours of taking this that you will have more energy and you will have more activity. You will want to be more active. And by taking this over longer periods of time, you will notice that your immune system and your endocrine system, and your brain function are all improving, and you will look younger. This will help to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store and get the Boomer Boost. And you can take it separately or you can stack it with the Boomer Boost. I stack it. And that is the Gladiator Barley. Gladiator Barley will help to build muscle. It'll also bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. By bringing down inflammation and detoxifying your body and soaking up those free radicals, you're helping your immune system, your endocrine system, and your brain function, your vascular system. You'll be able to recover from your workout quicker. And you'll be able to help to control your A1C levels, especially if you stack this. So please go to my store and get the Gladiator Barley. You can also get the Heirloom Barley. The Heirloom Barley doesn't focus so much on strength training, while the Gladiator Barley does. So please go to my store, get the Boomer Boost and the Gladiator Barley. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. You just take this stack here and you're going to see huge benefits in slowing down the aging process. All right, let's listen about how MAGA turns on Trump over his war presidency.
Retailer agree most prominently, but others as well, sort of saying, look, this is not what we sort of wanted out of a MAGA president, right? What is going on here, President Trump?
Donald Trump returned from South Korea this morning, where he met with the Chinese President Xi Jinping and made a series of announcements on closer trade ties. Trump scored the meeting at 12 out of 10, so he was very happy about it all. But that's maybe just a truce in the trade wars rather than a forever love affair. Meanwhile, less love is being spread towards Venezuela. Its president, Nicolas Maduro, accused Trump of trying to turn his country into a colony of the US. It follows the US claim to have killed at least 43 people in strikes on alleged drug boats near Venezuela. Other world leaders win or seem to lose affection of the US president, seemingly based on whoever last hosted him for dinner, with fawning compliments and promises of a Peace Prize nomination. Let's talk more about this now with Jamil Jaffer, Executive Director at the National Security Institute at George Mason University in Washington, D.C. Hi, Jamil.
Hey, Neil.
So we've had a lot of more diplomacy and shutting diplomacy and shocking around the world this week with President Trump. Was his meeting with President Xi, was that a reset moment, would you conclude?
Well, I think the president certainly thinks so. He said a lot of very nice things about President Xi walking out of China and onto the plane. He does appear to have achieved at least something of a truce in the trade wars. He's agreed to reduce by 10% the tariffs on China, in particular, cutting in half the 20% tariffs he imposed as a result of the fentanyl trade coming out of China. He says he's got a deal with President Xi to reduce the amount of fentanyl coming to the United States. So obviously is a good deal for America, or is important for America because of the tens of thousands of people being killed by fentanyl every year. Beyond that, it looks like the president said that President Xi has agreed to start sending rare earth metals and magnets and the like to the U.S. again. Of course, what China said on the other side, though, is that they are pausing their actions taken in October. They didn't mention the actions taken in April, so it's still a little unclear what exactly all this means. We haven't seen any text of the deal. We've just got the Chinese translation of President Trump's post on Truth Social. So we'll see what it all means in the long run. But at least for now, both leaders will be talking nicely about each other and appear to be cooling down, or at least temporarily cooling down, the trade war.
Yeah, what would have happened to make it a 13 out of 10 meeting?
Well, that's a great question. Maybe some sort of a further deal on TikTok, and it does appear the president wants to get that done. It does appear the president also, does think he's gotten some consensus on fentanyl, although it's not as much, I think, as he wanted. So we'll see. Maybe a Nobel Peace Prize nomination for the Chinese would have gotten to a 13 or maybe even a 15 out of 10.
That offer of putting in forward for a peace prize, that does carry a lot of favour with the president. And it's seeming if you want something for your country, if you want tariffs reduced, if you want military support, tell him he's going to get the prize.
It does appear to work for Pakistan and not so much for India. So it does, at least in that dynamic, appear to have made something of a difference.
Let's turn our eyes to the other side of the world, to South America, where Donald Trump's got quite keen interest at the moment. He's been going around murdering, some people would say, those who are believed to be drug smugglers on the coast of Venezuela. What's he up to?
Well, look, the president obviously is deeply concerned about the drug trade and the flow of illegal narcotics into the United States. A lot of the problem the president's been focused on, at least early in his administration, was the flow of fentanyl from China through Mexico. He's now concerned about the flow of various kinds of drugs and illegal immigrants from Venezuela, and now he's raising concerns about Colombia and cocaine as well, which have been historically there, but we did have a series of successful efforts under Plan Colombia under prior presidents. So we had some success. The president now unhappy, concerned these drug smugglers are bringing illegals and drugs into the U.S. in these drug boats. So he has ordered the U.S. military as a national security matter, so threat to the United States. In parties claim invasion, and parties claim that these individuals are narco-terrorists because of the lives they're taking with their drugs. And so he's authorized military action by the U.S. military against these drug boats, a number of strikes in the Atlantic, at least one in the Pacific. And he also disclosed last week that he authorized CIA covert action, not typically announced by American presidents, in Venezuela, not clear to what end or what kind of covert action. Clearly a threat against the Maduro regime. We've also seen an aircraft carrier battle group now placed in the Caribbean, and overflights, or at least alleged flights by B-52s and B-1B bombers, nuclear-capable bombers, off the coast of Venezuela. So a lot of sort of saber rattling going on when it comes to Venezuela and sort of Latin America right now for President Trump.
Is it not constitutionally somewhat questionable to be using military tactics and strikes against individuals for what is a criminal activity?
Well, this is something of a debate, right? If the president believes it's a national security matter and makes that argument, and which he has full-throatedly, he sent a letter to Congress under the War Powers Resolution indicating he had put American forces in hostilities and authorized the use of armed strikes under his powers commander-in-chief and chief executive to prevent the flow of drugs in the United States that were killing Americans. So his claim is, look, this is an imminent national security threat to our country. Americans are dying. I'm going to use military action. Numerous presidents over the course of decades, even the course of the entire history of the American Republic, have used that authority and claimed that authority without authorization from Congress, without a declaration of war. That being said, when these things are sustained, Congress has sought to reel them in. Never successfully. The War Powers Resolution has now been around for the better part of 4 decades. It's never been successful. Congress doesn't seem inclined to enforce it in any way here against drug dealers coming from South America.
Are you comfortable with that?
Well, look, I think that you want Congress to do its job, right? You want Congress to authorize use of military force when the president sees
Congress doesn't seem to be involved. That's the point. The president seems to be doing things without going to Congress at all, including building an enormous ballroom on the side of the White House.
Well, so he did send the required notice to Congress saying, look, I'm doing this thing. Yeah. Here's a letter saying I'm doing it. Congress has the opportunity.
I mean, this is money that they ought to be signing off. What is it, $300 million to build this huge edifice on the side, twice the size of the actual White House, and he's just acting like a personal, there's a personal fiefdom, no?
Well, so 2 different issues. Let's talk about the building of the White House.
So yeah, we are lifting everywhere, but yeah.
Right. So on the White House build, right, the president is taking private donations to do that. That's actually, interestingly, it sounds really sort of shady on its face, right? But it turns out that's actually pretty consistent with historical precedent for renovations of the White House. Whether it's a good idea or bad idea, we can debate that. But historically, the Truman balcony and the like, with the exception, I think, of maybe the Truman balcony, all the other renovations, including the Rose Garden, were done with private donations to this land trust that's around the National Park Service. So that's actually not that unusual. You're right, skipping past the boards that approve these things and the like are a problem. But of course, those boards are all appointed by people, and he appoints those boards, so they're likely to sign off at some point anyhow. But to go to your point about the money spent on these strikes, you're right. He's using military dollars and weapons and the like. That is something Congress needs to appropriate money for. Of course, the government is shut down. Congress hasn't done its job. The president and Congress haven't come to a deal on spending. That's some set of problems, and we see that now playing out here as well.
No, I appreciate it. It sounded like I was sort of leaping all over the place there, from going from Venezuela drug traffickers to a ballroom on the east wing of the White House. But I think the point being that there's a theme between all of these scenarios of in the news this week, and that is the president uniquely seems to act so independently, and it comes with tariffs as well. That Senate today passed a vote saying they don't like what he's done on tariffs, essentially. But of course, that is also something that comes just straight from the pen and the hand of President Trump without any consultation or any sign-off of government. Is that the way Trump seems to like to operate, where he does things which he can do very much independently by presidential decree?
But there's no question that that's how President Trump operates. It's how he likes to operate. I think he'd obviously prefer if there weren't a Congress. It would be easier for him to operate and run and do the things he wants to do. By the way, not that different than a lot of presidents, right? You know, President Obama and President Biden, both of whom were former U.S. senators, both when they got into office and they faced trouble with the legislative branch was controlled by the other party, they sort of pushed back and did a lot of things on their own. Maybe not as much as President Trump, maybe not as aggressively, maybe not moving as fast. But the truth is that this is a common theme of presidents. It is, I think, heightened by the way that President Trump operates, by the way he talks about these things, the kind of actions he takes, whether it's the Doge firings or the tearing down of the East Wing, right? A lot of this is operational, but the truth is, you're right, for a long time, Congress hasn't done its job effectively, hasn't been an effective check on the presidency. And the question is, when is Congress going to stand up and do its part? And at least today, this week, this month, this year, and maybe something will change after the midterm elections, although I kind of doubt it, I don't see Congress prepared to stand up and assert its own power. The system of checks and balances only works insofar as one of the checks or the balance is willing to do its job. Congress, frankly, hasn't been doing that here. And it's not just a Trump thing, although it is most evident here. It's been going on for years.
And there's an absence, I suppose, of a organized and still fractured Democratic Party that doesn't know how to decide which is the best approach to tackle and having a very specific line of attack against Trump.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's one of the problems that we've seen. I think, look, the Republican Party itself isn't standing up for its traditional values in the face of things that President Trump might do, because they've determined that their political future is best served by following Donald Trump, and that may be right. Their calculus, that's their calculus. For the Democrats, they haven't figured out to get a consistent message going that says, here is not just we're opposed to President Trump, we don't like what he does, we don't like the way he operates, we don't like his tone, right? They don't have a positive agenda for America. Here are the 8 things we plan to do, right? And so I think that's the challenge they're going to face coming into these midterms. You know, normally in midterm elections, which will come in a year from now, you see Democrats with a significant majority gaining seats. I'm not sure that's going to happen. We'll see. There's a long time to go before that election, at least a year now, about a year and a few days. The problem, of course, is you've got to have an agenda given American people. It can't just be, we don't like Donald Trump, we don't support his policies. There's got to be a positive agenda. Democrats haven't yet figured that out. Frankly, they haven't figured out whether they want to go more progressive or run to the middle. I have a view on this, but I don't think they're paying any attention to what I think.
Let's return to the global countries of focus that has been around this week that Donald Trump is doing. Is it still a surprise to people how much international affairs are occupying the attention of President Trump? We obviously know that events force that to some extent. We've obviously with Gaza and his desire to do a deal on the peace deal and hoping that holds together. But has he got a new thirst for international affairs and America's place on the world stage that perhaps even his own supporters wouldn't have imagined he would have done before this second presidency?
Well, I think there is certainly a certain amount of frustration in the Make America Great Again, the MAGA base here in the United States, as they see President Trump taking strikes against Iran, which I think most of the Republican Party and the MAGA base, and frankly a lot of Democrats supported those strikes, but then seeing him get involved in military strikes in the Caribbean, threatening Venezuela. Right now they're seeing the potential for this presidency to turn into a war presidency, not just a trade war with China, not just the economics that President Trump has long talked about, even before he was president, but now real military action. And I do think that makes a lot of members of the MAGA base uncomfortable. They were uncomfortable with it when it was President Bush. They were uncomfortable with it under Obama and Biden. I think they're going to be similarly uncomfortable against it under President Trump. And you've seen some members of his own party, Marjorie Taylor Greene most prominently, but others as well, sort of saying, look, this is not what we sort of wanted out of a MAGA president, right? What is going on here, President Trump? At the same time, you know, between you and me, I think, and all of our listeners, I think the president's doing the right thing. He needs to be able to push back effectively against our adversaries overseas. That includes Iran, that includes North Korea, it includes Venezuela, and by the way, it includes Russia and Ukraine, and China went and threatened Taiwan, and we still have to get that thing, sorted out as well, which we haven't quite done yet.
Yeah, I mean, is it possible that he's going to escalate the situation around South America off the coast of Venezuela? There's the US's biggest warship is there. And the MAGA equally worried about escalation in that region?
I think there's no doubt that they are a big believer, and they elected President Trump in part on the agenda of ending all global wars. And I don't think they're really excited about seeing an aircraft carrier in the Caribbean and seeing B-52 and B-1 bombers flying off the coast of Venezuela, even as much as they might not like Nicolas Maduro or the drugs coming to the United States. It's one thing to take counterterrorism drug strikes against a bunch of boats or submarines in the Atlantic or even one in the Pacific. It's a whole different thing to get the U.S. military engaged actively in the Western Hemisphere. Even those, there are some of those, there are those who think this is the right thing for President Trump to be doing. I think his base is going to be very skeptical of that plan.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. This is a dual-purpose product. This will bring down inflammation and help you control your lipid profile. By doing that, you're helping your immune system and you're preventing plaque buildup for your cardiovascular system. Vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is a cofactor for gene expression. Also, vitamin D3 helps to absorb calcium. And vitamin D3 helps to get rid of cells that are infected. It forces the cell to go into apoptosis. This is very important to take during the fall and the winter season. So please go to my store, get the vitamin D3, and get the olive leaf extract, boost up that immune system. And with vitamin D3, you're helping your cardiovascular health and also your bone density. Do some resistance training with vitamin D3 and take in calcium. And get those denser bone, so when you're in your geriatric years, your bones will be less brittle. Alrighty. All right, let's listen to The Economist about Mamdani.
Charlotte, why don't you start by telling us about Zoran Mamdani, a man who I have to confess, just a few months ago, I had never heard of him.
Well, he's 33 years old. His prior job was as a state assemblyman in Albany. He's a democratic socialist. He is a really skilled politician. I mean, he comes out smiling all the time. He presents this very positive vision for New York. And I think it's worth, before we go into his policies, just laying the context. His main opponents in this race for mayor were people who were, to use the technical term, horrible, absolutely horrible candidates. So you had Eric Adams, who's the current mayor of New York, who has been the subject of an alleged corruption scandal. You have Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, aging former governor, who just hasn't gotten the memo that his political career is over and clinging on to the limelight. And you have a New York population that's deeply fed up for the reasons that we've been discussing.
I love your polite but utterly devastating critiques of the current mayor of New York and other contenders. It reminds me of the fantastic line in your cover leader this week, where you spoke very positively about Michael Bloomberg as the last good mayor the city had, but you said he has the charisma of a spreadsheet, which I thought was...
I'm a big fan of Michael Bloomberg, but charisma is not his
Just before we hear more from about Zoran Mamdani, can you just, point of clarification, tell me what a democratic socialist actually is, John?
Well, the Democratic Socialists of America are a very small group. Zoran Mamdani is one of their number, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is another. They, until pretty recently, had a platform that was really out there. They wanted to defund the police, get rid of the Senate, nationalize a lot of industries. In the intervening time, in the past couple of years, they've actually updated their platform. It's a little more mainstream now than it was. They've ditched some of the crazier stuff. But I think what it is mainly is a signaling device to say, we're fed up with centrist Democrats. We don't like Republicans. We're fed up with the same old centrist Democrats, Chuck Schumer, whoever, and we really want to change things. So I think it's more a kind of expressive thing, in a sense, of a kind of identity badge. It's a way of being on the left and being an outsider in some, similar way politically to how Donald Trump was able to come to power, promising a whole bunch of stuff that people kind of knew he couldn't do, But the fact that he was so mad and was proposing such radical things demonstrated to the electorate that like he really got it in a way that other people perhaps didn't.
So Zora Mamdani is a democratic socialist. He's young and he's an extraordinarily good campaigner. Let's just have a look at one of his many brilliant TikTok videos.
I'm freezing. You're right. As the next mayor of New York City, let's plunge into the details. Stabilized unit, and their rents are set by the rent guidelines board. The board is made of 9 members, and the mayor appoints each one.
Ed, you've watched a number of these Mamdani TikTok videos and Instagram videos. What do you take away from it? Are we all going to be doing this kind of thing soon?
I tell you, I really like his energy and enthusiasm. I think it's a strong contrast with the kind of pessimism America's a hellhole kind of version of change.
Now think about it. They mentioned that AOC was part of a platform that wants to get rid of the Senate. Now think about the wisdom of our founding fathers. I keep on saying this on every video lately. Plato warned us in the Republic about this conversation that was going on between different individuals and Socrates. And they were stating that once a democracy starts to take hold, where it's mob rule, the plebs are ruling, you'll move into tyranny. Now, our founding fathers made sure that we had a constitutional republic, not a democracy. So don't fall into this trap that we have a democracy. We do not have a democracy. Secondly, our founding fathers also understood some of the problems that Rome had. So they took the lessons learned from the Greeks, the Greek philosophers, and they also started to pay attention to, well, wait a minute, Rome had some problems. And that you needed to have branches of government to prevent one branch taking over the country. So for individuals to be represented from a population level, the House of Representatives was established. The upper chamber, which is the Senate, are the ones that have a longer duration for their seat, and they are more of the elder statesmen. The judicial branch takes care of, well, many things, but in terms of the Supreme Court, it takes care of making sure that whatever laws are passed are constitutional. All right, it does a few other things too, but that's the big part of it. Now, the judicial branch also has lower courts that deals with other issues at the federal level, and then you have states that have their own court system. But let's just stick to the federal level here. So you have the judicial branch, and then you have the executive branch. They're all co-equal. If AOC got what she wanted and did away with the Senate, then what would happen is that you don't have elder statesmen. You would have individuals that are up for re-election every 2 years at the House level. And so what happens is that the legislative branch is falling in the mob rule category that Socrates in Plato's Republic warned us about. If you go down that road, what will happen is that there'll be an erosion of your constitutional freedoms. If you pay attention, when some of the radical stuff that happens in the House, it gets toned down in the Senate, because that's where the elder statesmen are. So do we really want socialism? Because think about what socialism wants. They want a one-party government. They want to enter in, this is the will of the people, and then all of a sudden it's a technocracy. You have individuals that are doing top-down management. Is that what we really want? That's not what our founding fathers agreed upon. Socialism is dangerous It's dangerous. And these people on The Economist, they push Keynes, they push socialism. They call them The Economists, and they're not even pro-capitalist.
Trump demands. I love the fact that his mum directed Salam Bombay, which is a fantastically good film. So there's lots to like about him, but I worry about his incredible lack of experience. I worry about his position on Israel, and I think his policies, even allowing for the fact that
I worry that he doesn't pay attention to history, because the grand experiment between capitalism and communism was already played out during the Cold War, and it ended after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And you know what the conclusion of the test was? Communism is not a productive way to grow an economy versus capitalism. But Mamdani doesn't pay attention to history. But most people that are young don't.
Says they're kind of sibling devices. I think that they're kind of terrible. And the only thing that makes me have any hope is that since it's become more and more apparent that he's going to be mayor, he's actually talking to his opponents, talking to people who he wouldn't normally expect to talk to, which is maybe an indication he's going to moderate.
Another hope is that a lot of things that he's promised are things that he just cannot do. And so I suppose the optimistic case for Mamdani is that he both moderates. He's already made some noises about how he's changed his mind on defunding the police, and he's changed his mind on some of his more radical ideas. And some of the policies that we think, I think, are bad, maybe there's some disagreement on how to. He won't actually be able to carry them through.
Let's actually, before we discuss what we think of his policies, let's have a quick summary of what they are, and let's hear from the man himself first.
We started this campaign with 3 policy demands: freeze the rent, make buses fast and free, deliver universal childcare. Those are the same promises that we are going to end this year. This is a campaign that looks at the dignity of working class people as a non-negotiable.
It's hard to disagree with that. The dignity of working class people is non-negotiable. Charlotte, what do you make of his promises? Are they realistic?
Well, I think that the need that he identifies is real, as we've already discussed, the cost of childcare, all these costs that New Yorkers face. So I think he's absolutely right to make these the focus of his campaign, right on a policy level and right on a political level, which we can talk about whether you agree with that. I think his methods for how he would go about trying to make New York City affordable aren't, may not be passed because they require a giant tax increase, which would require the cooperation of state government, and he cannot do unilaterally. And that if they were passed, they just they have been proposed and might be implemented in a way.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it just amazing on The Economist? A bunch of Brits, all right? The Economist, right? We love New York. Well, New York doesn't love you. All right, so we're The Economist, and we're from Britain, and we love socialism, and we love Keynes, and we love to just print more money. And oh, by the way, we have a doom loop, and we're totally in debt. And the central bank, the Bank of England, can't do their quantitative tightening to sell off their balance sheet because they bought so many assets during the Lehman crisis and during COVID. And oh, by the way, our government is dissolving because it can't do it. It's totally incompetent. But we're going to tell the Americans on how to control their economy. Why don't they look in the mirror and realize that their failed policies is what's driving England into the ground? And so they want to promote Mamdani? Mamdani is part of the problem that the Brits have. Overspending to the point where you can't afford it. You just dig more debt, and eventually it comes home to roost, and you have a unproductive economy. But these are the socialists. These are the wine and cheese Democrats. These are the ones that are going to tell you they know better. They know better than Adams, Jefferson, Hamilton. They know better. They know better because they went to school.
Doesn't take into account the underlying factors that are driving up New York City's costs. So if you add social programs and design them in the most expensive way possible, daycare, for instance, having wages for daycare providers that are the same as unionized teachers, that would be really expensive. And so any politician has to make trade-offs between different policy priorities and the broader, take into account the broader fiscal health of the city. And it's not clear to me.
Every single one of those Brits are liberal. Every single one of them. They push these policies in their own country.
Really skilled as a politician. Being a mayor requires being a manager. If you're a congressman, all you have to do is talk and raise money, not necessarily in that order. As a mayor, you have to actually operate a city, and I'm not sure that he will.
The other point is that this is being presented as some sort of, hope for New York, but actually these things won't help New York.
No,
and when
exactly.
They don't help New Yorkers, what will people do then? They'll just get crosser and more furious. I mean, just let me take one example. He wants a minimum wage of $30 by 2030. That number's plucked out of the air. It's only 30 because it's 2030. I mean, if that's really the basis for coming up with this figure, it's ridiculous.
Yes, just on rent freeze, isn't it? This is an important one because housing is such a big challenge in New York. If you freeze rent for 2 million New Yorkers, the effect of that freeze is to raise the rent for other New Yorkers. So it's a classic instance where you have a knock-on effect that isn't taken into account with the headline proposal.
New York's mayor overall, relative to other American cities and other mayors in other big cities in the West, is not a hugely powerful office. Where the mayor does have a lot of power is over policing, so he would have real power over the NYPD, and also has quite a lot of power over education, over schools, where New Yorkers currently are getting a really bad deal for their tax dollars. One of the things that's striking to me about Mamdani's campaign is there's almost nothing about education in there.
I want to talk about just one other element of Mamdani, which is really striking, which is his support for Palestinians and his criticism of Israel, and particularly Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, it is very striking. Like New York, the highest Jewish population in the United States, may, elect a mayor who has very much and very outspokenly.
These people are the cause of Mamdani. They've been promoting freebies in society for decades. They promote socialism. This is the reason why Britain is a shithole. They need to look in the mirror and realize there's this video of her debating Stephen Bannon, all right? She's a socialist. She's a fucking socialist. She is the problem.
Yeah, he's threatened to arrest Netanyahu if he turns up in America, which is because America isn't signatory to the ICC either, so it doesn't have to. I mean, two things strike me about that. The first is it is further evidence of the disenchantment with Israel and its policies in Gaza over the past 2 years, and that's not restricted to the United States. It's a more broad phenomenon. The other thing, though, is I think it shows Mamdani's really superior political intelligence. I mean, doing this unexpected thing, standing against Israel, which would have been a disqualifier 10 years ago, actually demonstrates to voters that he's sort of authentic, which is a requirement in modern politics. Whereas I think a politician who says I must always support Israel but looks insincere about it actually looks inauthentic and very political.
But isn't it also a reflection? And remember, this was we did a cover story on this just a few weeks ago of the very dramatic drop in support, particularly amongst younger Americans on both sides of the political aisle for Israel.
Yes, that's right, and it's particularly the case with Americans under the age of about 35, which are probably they're probably going to show up for Zohar Mamdani next week in New York. The other thing I'd add, just in addition to what Ed's already said about the authenticity point, and I think, with Mamdani, it's a kind of performative authenticity, but as it is with authenticity is. Yeah, there's a point here about, I think he does, but he's a great performer, and people take that performance for his authentic self, I think. But there's been a decline in the ability of parties to act as sort of gatekeepers for their own candidates in primaries. And it used to be the case that either on the Republican side, pre-Donald Trump, or on the Democratic side until relatively recently, somebody in the party might have said, you cannot do this, it's disqualifying, you cannot have this approach to Israel, you cannot get through a Democratic primary like that. Now what we're discovering, I think largely because of changes in media, those gatekeeping functions that the parties used to perform just don't exist anymore. And so you can have a much wider spectrum of views than used to be the case.
Yes, this is The Economist, pushing their liberal agenda. And they don't look in the mirror and really say, you know what, the push of Keynes, the push for socialism, the push for all these hammock social programs are the cause of making the society less productive. And then what happens is you get a outlier like Mamdani that's coming in and takes it one step further. Instead of just socialism, it's ultra-socialism or communism. And unfortunately, the elite schools in Europe and in the United States are pushing this kind of agenda. They're pushing for print more, create more social programs. Well, wait a minute. People are taxed to death already. Literally taxed to death. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, so you slow down the aging process. See, hopefully you'll be alive when we see actually real capitalism flourishing in New York. Get turmeric. Turmeric will soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. And guess what? There are an awful lot of socialists that are creating a lot of inflammation. There's a lot of free radicals out there creating inflammation in your society, and you need to neutralize them. Please go to my store and get the turmeric. It's going to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system and your brain function. Because by bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals at the cerebral level, voila, you're protecting your neurons. Lignans. It's going to help your immune system, your endocrine system, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. And ashwagandha root is going to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. See, when you're watching the news and you notice that New York's going to turn into a socialistic hellhole, your cortisol levels are going to go up. And if it's chronic, then those chronic cortisol levels are going to be immunosuppressive. You want to bring that down. You want to bring back capitalism. To do it, to bring down that cortisol level, take ashwagandha. Bringing down that cortisol level, especially if it's elevated chronically, is immunosuppressive. You don't want to do that. You want to bring that cortisol level down and boost up your immune system. All right. By stacking these together, you're going to boost up that immune system. You're going to help your cardiovascular health because you're reducing plaque formation, and you're protecting your neurons by bringing down that inflammation at the cerebral level. Now, stack them together to get the max benefit. In addition, this is really important to take during the fall and the winter season. You know why? Because it helps to boost up your immune system. Now, lignans, turmeric, and ashwagandha can be stacked together and they're synergistic. Take them, and guess what? You do that regularly, and you're slowing down the aging process. So you will have the vitality to fight the socialists. Let's listen to Gerard Henderson about AI writing flood.
For a leading space agency, ambition becomes reality with the power of Smartsheet. AI-enabled workflows keep teams and components coordinated so every mission stays on course. Smartsheet, helping workflow to make the impossible possible.
Your personal finances start with you, but they support your entire home team. With Thrivent, your money can be a force for good for the people, causes, and communities you're most thankful for. Thrivent, where money means more.
So Seth, can you tell me what happened on Amazon with your book?
As soon as it was published, it was swarmed by these crappy AI knockoffs that appear to have been generated algorithmically.
How many do you think were actually listed on Amazon?
There's more every day, it seems. They're sucking up a bunch of the content that's around the book or that's been published around the book, and then selling for $15 or $20 books that will confuse people, so where they think they're buying my book, but they're actually buying this AI slop.
So take a look at these two books. One of them is The Fort Bragg Cartel, Exposing Drug Trafficking and Murder in the Special Forces. That was written by Seth Harp. That was the guy that you saw at the beginning of this video. Seth's a journalist, but he's also a veteran. He's a lawyer. He might be the calmest guy I know. This second book, though, looks a lot like Seth's book, but it isn't. It's almost certainly an AI-generated book that was made to look as similar as possible to Seth's book in order to confuse customers. Around the time that Seth's book was coming out, he started keeping an eye on his Amazon listings. This is a really normal thing for writers to do, just to make sure, that they're near the top of their search results. And, you're just excited and you're nervous because your book is going to finally come out. People are going to get to read it and you want to see how it's going to do. Seth knows that there were a lot of books that were a lot like The Fort Bragg Cartel, and they were all published in late July or early August. Really, they were all published around the time that The Fort Bragg Cartel started being noticed by critics and reviewers, and people might be searching for it on Amazon. Many of them have similar titles to Seth's book. Some of them even put Seth's name in the title, saying that it was inspired by Seth Harp or it was written with context from Seth Harp. Whatever the hell that is supposed to mean. And almost all of them had covers that looked quite a bit like Seth's cover. Seth's book has this really dark cover, a little bit of light in the corner, and these big, bold letters. It's not the most original cover, but you can tell when another, book is trying to rip it off. And most of these books, frankly, looked like they were trying to rip Seth off. There were even a couple of books that purported to be biographies of Seth. So they were saying that they were going to tell the real story of the author behind The Fort Bragg Cartel. Now, when I sat down and had a call with Seth to talk about this, I asked, just to verify, if he had ever been contacted by anyone who said that they wanted to write a biography of him. And of course, he said no, there is no real biography of Seth Harp. These are all fake, and they often feature AI images, which, by the way, don't even look like Seth. This is not a video about how Amazon is particularly evil. It's not really a story about Amazon at all. We'll talk about Amazon a little bit, but it's bigger than that. It's also not really a story about how AI is proving to be pretty bad for writers, people who are trying to make a living doing real journalism. Seth did everything you want a journalist to do. He spent 2 years writing this book. He was flying back and forth between Texas and North Carolina. I think he went a few other places to meet with sources. He was going through government documents. He was just trying to get any interview he could with anyone in the Special Forces or anyone who knew people in the Special Forces to try to piece together this story. The point is, this was a lot of work. But the video is not about how Seth in particular is getting screwed. It's about how you, as a customer or just as a citizen, that'll make sense in a minute, I promise, are also getting screwed by AI writing. We are currently getting flooded with AI writing, and I want to talk about that. There have been fake books for nearly as long as there have been books. As soon as people started taking the time to write books, people started counterfeiting them or producing illicit copies or selling them. As soon as we started protecting things with things like IP law or copyright, people started violating that because people will do things that are illegal or immoral in order to make a quick buck. And Amazon has had fake books for a long time too. Amazon has a general problem with fake products on their platform. What we see now, though, is a dramatic increase in scale. Using AI tools, whether that's ChatGPT or Claude or any other sort of open access generative AI system, using any of these systems, one person could produce massive numbers of fake books based on any title that they think is going to do well, and they could start listing them on Amazon. And I think I understand what the business model is here. This is speculation, but I think it makes sense. One person can use AI to generate, let's say, 10 fake books that are based on what they think is going to be a bestseller. They then give it a similar title and a similar cover. They throw it out on Amazon using Kindle or print-on-demand services, so they don't actually have to manufacture the book. And for maybe an hour's work, they can start making a little bit of money. And what you're really trying to do is trick people, or I actually think the better word here would be you're trying to defraud them. Right. They think that they're buying that book that they heard about on that podcast or in the newspaper, but but they're actually buying your fake AI copy. And while some of the people who buy fake books are going to get angry and return them, not everybody will. And so for very little work, these fraudsters are going to make some money. The listings often get removed, but other books will replace them. So these numbers are going to vary depending on when you check. But right before recording this video, I checked again to see how many fake books associated with the Fort Bragg cartel I could find on Amazon. And I found 47 fake books. Right now, Seth's book is a New York Times bestseller. It's been a bestseller for 2 weeks as of this recording. It's doing very well, and that attracts a lot of attention. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to think that these fake books, some of them really are selling and making people real money. Any book that these fraudsters think might be successful, they can create fake copies of it and then put it on Amazon and try to make some money. Here's an example that I found earlier this year. So Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson wrote a book called Abundance, and it has been a bestseller all summer. About 2 weeks after that book was published, I found another book that was being listed on Amazon, and it was called The Politics of Abundance, Building a Future of Prosperity and Progress, something like that, with inspiration from Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. So they even put Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson in the title. They also had a really similar cover. It had this kind of half globe thing that was meant to be like the earth is thriving and abundant and beautiful and progressive or something. It had the same vibe. And if you didn't look too closely, you might even think they're the same book. And that book was listed under a fake author's name, Ezekiel Thompson. And Ezekiel Thompson, I think, looks a lot like Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson mashed together if you weren't paying that much attention. And that's what these fraudsters are targeting. They're targeting people who aren't paying close attention. It's no secret that AI slop is filling up the internet right now. You're most likely watching this video on YouTube, and it is very easy to find tons and tons of AI-generated content that is low quality, that is not particularly entertaining, but is cheap to produce and fairly easy to monetize, meaning that some people are actually going to make some real money off of this. I didn't expect it to come to the book world. For some reason, I thought that the books were too difficult to knock off. But the people behind the fake Fort Bragg cartel or the person behind Ezekiel Thompson are really proving that any form of media you can imagine is going to be fake.
Exactly. So AI is literally going to destroy communication, the trust in communication, the trust of the printed word, the trust of human creativity in movies or even podcasts. I'm noticing now that like some history podcasts are now AI driven and not created by a historian connoisseur type. So either people will continue to use these services and consume the AI slop, or they will actually detach, and perhaps we will eventually unplug from this YouTube world that we're living in right now, this social media world. I think if we did plug out of it and consume content that could be verified, maybe that's what needs to happen, is some sort of verification system. People, I don't think, want to consume AI slop, as he calls it. But as it becomes more ubiquitous, you can't trust what's being printed unless it's somehow verified. And therefore, less people will consume that content, most likely. And those channels of disseminating information will start to die on the vine. But the trust now is starting to be eroded. See, early on, we used technology to be able to reach more people and to be able to it would be a marketplace of ideas, not a marketplace of ripoffs, right? So basically what has happened is that Amazon and even YouTube is turning into just China ripoffs. Now, I'm not saying that China's doing the AI slop. I bet in some cases they are. But there are other people that are just, creating AI slop. But I think if it's pervasive, I think eventually there's going to be a negative feedback loop where people will stop listening to content. I prefer to listen to a human voice, not an AI-driven voice. I prefer to watch documentaries that look like there is human creativity in it, not AI creativity. But other people may not care. You know, maybe I'm an outlier. I don't know what the percentage of people are that wants to watch human content versus AI content. But I suspect that when the quality starts to go down, when the facts are loose with what's being published, that within a short amount of time, within a few years, there may be a negative feedback loop that reduces actually viewership. And that might be a good thing. I mean, I stopped reading ebooks. I only read regular books. Okay? You know, go to your library and read books. There's nothing wrong with that. So, but it's sad. It's sad that where we're at with AI, where it's a tool to help create and to speed that creation, but it's also a tool to rip people off. And so what happens is as more and more people do this, more and more people do this, especially in academia. All right, let's say you're a student and you're not really reading the books and not really writing your own essays on the book you read or whatever, and you just have it AI generated, you won't even learn how to write or critically think. So there are other negative externalities by this AI slop.
Overrun with AI slop. And at the root of this, what I think is happening is that people want to find a way to make quick and easy money. We have this human urge or desire to find shortcuts and basically to cut corners. And those urges to find shortcuts and to cut corners will make us do things that we know are unethical, or simply, in those cases, those people just don't care. Like, they don't care if they're scamming you because they just want to make some money. So it could be laziness, but we can't really underestimate the effects of greed here also. I understand that most people don't really care about the publishing industry. And if you're watching some of my videos, maybe you consider yourself book savvy or internet savvy enough that you wouldn't fall victim to a scam like this. I say good for you. It sucks that it's going to happen to other people, but I'm glad that you have your guard up. But let's talk about two other examples that go out of the book world and prove that this flood of AI writing has the potential to harm you or at least to seriously impact your life, whether you consider yourself particularly internet savvy or not. And that's because AI writing is starting to affect the police and the legal system. So back in January of this year, so January 2025, there was an article that was published on a Department of Justice website that was all about AI-generated police reports. And apparently police reports take up an awful lot of cops' time. Whatever the number is, I'm sure that many cops think to themselves, man, I wish I didn't have to spend so much time doing paperwork. In fact, one police chief in Boulder, Colorado, called AI-generated police reports one of the most exciting innovations that they had ever seen in policing because it would free up officers' time to go and do things that they thought were more important. They called it proactive policing. There are a few different products that are being marketed to police officers and police departments to help them write their police reports. Some officers might just be using Claude or ChatGPT or something, but in addition to that, there are specific pieces of software that are being sold to police departments saying, hey, this will safely and reliably generate your police reports. Most of the articles that I read about this focus on something called Draft One. On Draft One's website, they say that they can generate a high-quality police report in seconds. And they'll do this by analyzing body cam.
Your best idea deserves the best media. Access an award-winning stock library from a global community of artists.
And they'll do this by analyzing body cam footage and also the audio from that. It was a little vague on whether or not it actually does some kind of like machine vision or if it's just based on the audio, but it takes those files and then it will generate what it says is a high quality report. But there is one major problem with a piece of software like Draft One. Everybody at this point knows that AIs hallucinate, that simply put, they make stuff up. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is a civil liberties organization that is dedicated to protecting our rights online. They investigated Draft One, and they found that there were some serious problems with the safety features that are included with that software. Namely, there's no way to tell in the final report what was written by an AI and what was written by a police officer. The fear is that this could actually
This falls into what I was saying about the Bio-Patriot Act. All right, and that is that there's an over-reliance of AI systems. There's this surveillance state, and that what happens is your civil liberties starts to become curtailed, and it now becomes a minority report kind of thing, where you have systems that will use predictive algorithms to determine thought crime, all right? Well, on top of this concept of thought crime with Minority Report, you also have an over-reliance of technology by the national security state or police municipalities that may get it wrong. Things may fall through the cracks and just get it wrong and cause civil liberty issues during the whole legal process. And so why should a police officer get more money if they are relying on more and more AI tools? Well, shouldn't we be spending less money then? Shouldn't these AI tools make them more efficient and therefore they have to work less hours? Maybe you need less police officers if you're using surveillance technologies like cameras and predictive algorithms and AI report writing. So I'm not for defunding the police, but what I am for is defunding a national security state. I think human beings need to do their job and not be so reliant on AI. Well, I think his point here is this. People can take advantage of AI tools and create his term AI slop, which is a good term. But, you know, it's a create AI slop, but not just that. AI can just get it wrong if you're not using the tool and checking what the AI is generating. You can see this in Grok or even ChatGPT, where the information that you're provided is actually wrong, all right? So if you don't know any better, if you can't check the work, if you don't have discernment, if you don't have a base understanding of the knowledge that you're searching on some sort of AI tool, then you could be misguided.
Perjure themselves in legal proceedings. It means that falsehoods and misleading statements about some, a criminal proceeding or about some event could be entered into the record. This could be a problem because you might get a mistrial or something like that, or it could mean, in the worst case, that someone is wrongfully convicted because of a false police report. That's an extreme case, but it's a possibility that I think we have to keep in mind. EFF says that Draft One does not save any of the drafts it generates. It doesn't have something like edit history. And if a police officer were to just copy the text out of the window and paste it somewhere else, it just disappears from Draft One. So we have no way of tracking the origin or provenance of any of these police reports. So previously we could assume that it was just the officer doing their best, we hope, right, to make sure they're not lying, but we would assume that it was the officer doing their best to describe the situation. But if we're using AI for that, we actually lose that assumption. That assumption no longer holds. And if there are falsehoods in a police report now, we have to ask, is it because the officer was lying? Or is it because an AI hallucinated? Or is it because the officer was negligent and didn't check and catch those mistakes? I'm sure that we will see headlines about this issue very soon. Now, the company behind Draft One's called Axon. They are most famous for inventing the taser. Actually, the taser has a troubled history that you could look up if you really wanted to. Axon says that there are safety features included with their software, which are intended to prevent or at least mitigate these sorts of mistakes. One of those features would insert deliberate errors into the police report, which would mean that a police officer, in order to be responsible, would have to go and catch them and fix them. There is also a feature which is supposed to ensure that there's a human in the loop and require a certain amount of editing in the final report. But a Mother Jones investigation found that most police departments that are using Draft One turn those features off. They don't want the safety features. They want the quick, easy, AI-generated police reports. And it might seem like this video is really about two different things, but here's what I think is connecting them so far. People make fake AI books.
My daughter's in ballet.
And you need to set a bun, and you don't know what set means.
Exactly.
This will keep her hair sleek, and this will keep it cute.
People make fake AI books because they want to make money from writing books, but they don't want to actually, go and write a book. That human drive to cut corners and to be lazy leads them to just use AI to write fake books. Police officers probably do not enjoy writing police reports, so they use AI to generate the reports for them. They cut corners because human beings have this tendency to be lazy. By the way, Axon also has a feature which would add a header to a document just saying that AI had been used in the process of generating the report. That's another feature, though, that can be turned off. And again, most departments that are using this software, they turn that off. It's actually very difficult to know how many police reports are being written with AI now because we don't have good data and we don't have any kind of mandated transparency, except in Utah. Utah has passed a law saying that police departments actually have to be transparent about their use of AI in police reports. Other states like California are considering that kind of legislation, but right now,
the thing is that the legislation should be to stop it. To stop the use of AI. If the officer needs to write the damn report, you're getting paid, write the damn report. This is crazy. This is crazy. This society is so fucked up.
Leader in AI transparency for police reports is Utah. So I say good job to the Utahns, I think it's what they call themselves. Good job to the Utahns. There's a chance that anyone who's watching this video has either already had encounters with the police or will at least one time in their life have some kind of encounter with the police, that they get pulled over for a speeding ticket or they get arrested for disorderly conduct or something much worse. And so I think there's a reason for absolutely everybody to care about this flood of AI writing that is being used to generate these police reports. We should demand, actually, that human beings write those reports so that we can properly hold people accountable if there are mistakes in them. We also should demand, I think, that lawyers who are handling these legal cases also write their legal briefs themselves. But there have been numerous stories. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them in the newspaper. I'll include a few links here in case you're interested, of lawyers using AI to write their legal briefs. And as a result, they have submitted arguments to judges. So they have gone to court and submitted arguments that relied on fake cases that were really just AI hallucinations. What happens if you build precedent? What happens if those aren't caught and you build precedent based on an AI hallucination? I have no idea what that means. And that's a much more serious problem than a couple of fake books being sold on Amazon. But again, I think it's all deep down related. This is not a complete anti-AI video. This is not about whether or not AI can be creative or ever be conscious, or whether or not even these systems really are AI. I kind of don't care about that right now. What I'm saying is that people are already using AI in irresponsible ways, in ways that could actually hurt you or people you know. They can hurt you because they defraud you out of some money, and so you lose $15, or because some huge part of your life now gets taken up dealing with AI-generated problems in the legal system. I always like to end my videos by talking about something positive. Here's what we can do about it. Here is the upside. Here is the chance for opportunity and reflection or something. But really, in this video, I'd say I don't know what we possibly do. If we could come up with some general solution for laziness, basically make it so that people don't want to be lazy about things that matter, maybe that would work, but good luck.
Society has some big problems when it comes to the future of technology. And we are not wise enough to deal with it. Not at all. All right, last, let's take a look at The Spectator about Prince Andrew in exile.
Nirvana's the Hi, I'm Samir Adwani, Commissioner of Major League Pickleball. Nirvana is a seamless travel booking system that you can use for your entire company.
Whatever your feelings, whether you are a committed monarchist, a Republican, or something in between, you look at the Andrew stuff and think this has not gone well for the monarchy, and it probably isn't over. We're probably going to be sitting down in a week or two and having another conversation because something else will have come to light. And I start to think to myself, how much damage can the monarchy sustain?
Hello and welcome to Spectator.
Before we go to the Spectator TV, which is run by human beings, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the peppermint, lavender, and tea tree deodorant or the citrus deodorant. Now, these deodorants are for males and females. It has no aluminum and no baking soda. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Extremely high quality ingredients, all natural, and it's dual purpose. You use it as a daily deodorant, and it'll also help to detoxify your body. And I'm willing to bet the deodorant you're using now doesn't help to detoxify your body. So please go to my store, get a couple bars for your household, and take this deodorant, use it every day, and it's going to help to detoxify your body. Now, if you're detoxifying your body regularly, your immune system and your endocrine system is going to perform better. Now, you ever wonder why people that seem to be sick all the time or have a weakened immune system, they age faster? Well, when you don't have a good immune system, you're producing lots of free radicals, you're producing lots of inflammation, you're contracting stuff around you, right? And it's affecting your body, and it takes a while to clear that infection and to heal the different tissues that have been affected. And that's taking energy from your body. A weakened immune system will speed up your aging. So if you boost up your immune system and you detoxify your body, you are slowing down that aging process. Now, if you do other stuff like soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation and all this stuff, then you're attacking the aging process in multiple vectors and slowing down that aging process. And so you'll have more vitality. You're increasing your longevity. It's a very simple concept, but most people don't do it. And that's the sad thing. It's something so simple. And if you just follow what I have if you just follow what I do, get the products on my store, and you stack them the way I tell you, you're going to slow down the aging process and boost up that immune system. So please go to my store and get the very high quality deodorants that I have. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. With that said, let's go back to Spectator and find out what's going on with Prince Andrew. I mean, just Andrew.
Hey, I'm John Connolly, the Spectator's news editor. Last night, Prince Andrew, now just Andrew, was formally stripped of all his titles and honours by the King. It's a bombshell announcement, and joining me to discuss is Alexander Larman, the books editor of Spec US, contributor to Spectator UK, and the author of numerous books on the royals. Late last night, the palace released this historic statement. It was quite terse, it was quite short, but I'm just going to read the first couple of lines for you. So they're saying, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and honours of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Now, listen to that, when you first read that statement, can you maybe get across to viewers how significant, how big, how historic this is?
Well, I think it's fair to say that it's been a very tumultuous year. It's been a very tumultuous half decade for the royal family, and this might be the most significant development yet, because the royal family is known as a firm for a reason. It's essentially a very close-knit organisation that specialises in making sure that its members are protected. And for a member, an integral member, such as Prince Andrew, to essentially be thrown to the wolves like this is an extraordinary development, because ultimately the royal family are now saying, we do not believe what he has said, we no longer believe that he's been telling the truth, and therefore we are going to cast him out. Because every single time before now he's been cast out, there's been some layer at which he hasn't quite penetrated. So in 2019, after the disastrous Newsnight interview, he gave up his royal patronages. In 2021, after the Queen paid off his hush money to Virginia Giuffre, he was stripped of more things. And then recently, he agreed to give up his title of Duke of York, and he agreed to give up his Order of the Garter. None of this has been quite enough. And we can now see that the final solution has been very simply to stop him being a prince. In fact, he's now going to be known as Mr. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, or Andy Windsor to his friends. It's enormously significant as a development, because what this means is that essentially he is no longer a member of the royal family. He is by birth, and that's about it. And so it's been said he's going to live in this presumably quite modest accommodation on the Sandringham estate. And it's interesting because just a couple of days ago, a big story, which I actually read about the Spectator, was that he was negotiating where he was going to live next, whether he was going to go off into Frogmore Cottage where Harry and Meghan used to live, and if he would leave Royal Lodge. And now that has been very much taken from him, and it's not his decision anymore.
How big a blow do you think this is to Andrew personally? Do you think he sees this as a humiliation now?
I don't feel sorry for Andrew per se, but I'd hate to be him this morning. I mean, imagine, despite your money, despite what protection your formerly royal status offers you, he's the most hated man in the country at the moment. And the headlines are absolutely devastating. I mean, The Sun went with Andrew, formerly known as Prince, which is quite a nice line. And I think
when I first heard the news yesterday, which was around 3 o'clock p.m. New York time, immediately I thought that he needs to be on suicide watch, because I would not be surprised that as things start to devolve in his life, that he will commit suicide.
It's a sense that it's an open season on him. And of course, a lot of people are openly asking whether any of his actions amount to criminality, if it's likely that he could be arrested, if he could even be charged with crimes. And if so, we receive a really unedifying spectacle of the first member of the royal family to go on trial for a criminal case, which if he's convicted, he'll usually go to prison. At this stage, anything is possible. I don't see any end to what's going to happen. Of course, the question that we have to ask is, how does this affect on the wider royal family? Because obviously, Charles will be hoping. A very strongly worded statement released last night, which explicitly allies him and the Queen with the victims of sexual abuse, such as the late Virginia Giuffre. It's every single word is 109 words long. Every single word, very carefully weighed, very carefully measured out. And essentially, what it's saying is, he chooses to continue to say this never happened. We no longer believe him. Our sympathies with the victims of Epstein and by association, people that Andrew may or may not have had dealings with. That's the people that we stand by. That is also how we want the monarchy to be seen, as modern and compassionate. I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if this has come too late, because I feel that this should have happened in 2019, which should have happened 6 years ago, after that Newsnight interview, where it's obvious Andrew was lying, that he was not being, shall we say, forthright about what's actually happened. You have to say now, well, what's next? Is this enough for the royal family? I don't know.
I think that's a very interesting point to make. And when you were talking there, you think, yeah, 2019 was that Newsnight interview. It seems an age away, but really, I mean, there's been a lot of trickier stories. There's been Virginia Giuffre's memoir. There's been about peppercorn rent at Royal Lodge, but in reality, not that much has changed. I mean, has it really? Like, we've known for a long time that Andrew's had an inappropriate relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, I suppose if there is a backlash, do you think it's because the palace didn't act soon enough, basically?
Well, I think the questions we have to ask at the moment are the royal family and their addiction to secrecy. Because, I mean, what we've noticed is that the royal family have never been very forthcoming about anything to do with financial affairs, and that's why, when it was revealed he never paid any rent on Royal Lodge, a lot of people will be thinking, why didn't he pay any rent on Royal Lodge? And of course, the question of how he's been funded is very much, it's a live issue, because we know from the Andrew Lowry book that came out a couple of months ago entitled that Andrew may well have had fairly dodgy business dealings when he was a trade envoy. So in other words, it may well have been that he's essentially been taking backhanders from various rather dodgy Middle Eastern and Far Eastern potentates in order to sustain his lifestyle. This may or may not be true, but what is certainly true is that Andrew, who has repeatedly been described as the late Queen's favourite child, which also, to be honest, children feel a bit sad because they're not the ones going around, having inappropriate relationship with teenage girls. But the point is that Andrew now is, I can't see any way back into any kind of public life for him. I can't see if he'd want to get back into any kind of public life, because I said this actually when I was on the show last time. If you put Andrew on Windsor High Street, he'd get torn to pieces. It's a really scary thought that actually he's not safe. I mean, that's the thing. There are going to be people out there who have seen this level of coverage of him. And I mean, most people think of it as, I mean, let's be absolutely honest. Most people think that Prince Andrew is a paedophile and a sex offender. They think he should be in jail. And that is something which, unless he was to be found not guilty in a court of law.
And these allegations he denies, we should say as well.
Of course. He denies all allegations against him. It's important to stress these things. But most people don't believe. The fact he's been caught lying over and over and over again makes it harder and harder and harder for him to deny these things. So the question is, what happens next? I mean, does he have any way back? No, I don't think so. I mean, the question is also, are his daughters going to be affected by all this? Because the question remains, did they have dealings with Epstein themselves? Did they take the Epstein dollar? And I think that is the next story is waiting to emerge, because Andrew is now going to be sent into what the royal family hope is going to be obscurity in a small house in Sandringham somewhere. If I was Andrew, I'd leave the country. I'd go to the Middle East or somewhere like that. I'd basically tap up one of the people who gave me money in the first place and said, look, bit of a bind, you might receive the papers lately, can I have somewhere to stay? Because in the Middle East, he's beyond jurisdiction. He's not going to be, he can still live a life like he's accustomed to out there. Whereas in this country, it's not going to be any kind of life whatsoever. He's going to be skulking in a corner of the Sandringham estate at his brother's largesse as well. And of course, I don't think there's any love lost between Charles and Andrew anymore. With a nephew who hates him, who's made it very clear that when he becomes king, Andrew will be evicted from that as well. If I was Andrew, I'd leave the country. I mean, I would just literally, because look, the Duke of Windsor had to leave the country for being a Nazi sympathiser, and I mean, that's quite bad. But let's not play that one down. But on the other hand, I'm not going to say this is worse what Andrew's done. So in fact, we have to take the attitude that we're better off without him, and he's better off leaving the country.
Does feel very medieval, doesn't it? Sending a prince in exile abroad, but I don't think anyone's calling for him to come back across the water at any point. I think it's fair to say.
Well, I'm absolutely sure William would love to put him in the Tower of London. I mean, he could have, quarters there. He could look at the ravens, play the beef eaters all day. Lovely life.
One thing that has been mentioned, Alex, is the fact that despite losing all his titles, it seems that Andrew will remain eighth in line to the throne. Do you think there's obviously, it's very, very incredibly unlikely that he'd ever become king because of that. But do you think there is a sort of tension here for the palace, which is that, yes, we're saying he's a horrible man, he's been exiled, he's been cut off his titles, but still, he is in line to the throne there. And do you think that can last?
Well, I didn't think he'd be stripped of his princedom without an act of parliament. And clearly he has just been stripped of his princedom, and there didn't need to be a big political debate about it. So, no, I mean, I can't see that lasting much longer, because ultimately, just because you happen to be eighth in line to the throne, because you happen to be born the second son of the late Queen, that can be removed from you quite easily, I would have thought. I mean, everything else has been removed. Why shouldn't this be? But you start to think to yourself, well, what's the point of any of it? If you can just take all this stuff away from people, why? Because I think the whole thing about the royal family, to a large extent, is it is a kind of make-believe that we're all complicit in, but we have to believe in the pageantry. It's like a classic line from Lord Bypass, isn't it? You cannot let sunlight in upon the institution of the monarchy. You cannot bring it to too much exposure, because as soon as you do that, you've got a situation where the whole thing begins to collapse. And of course, so much of the success of the royal family depends on this relationship between the monarchy, who essentially rule by consent, and the people, as represented by Parliament, who allow them to rule. Because obviously that's the whole basis on which Charles II came back for the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. That was the understanding. There would never again be a situation as happened with his father, where essentially the monarchy was a kind of tyranny, where there was no check or balance on the power of the individual monarch. And what we are now seeing is that I don't think there's an appetite for republicanism in this country. I don't think that, Graham Smith and his Republic movement, they don't have a huge amount of support. But I've often thought, well, what if somebody who is not just a rabble-rouser, somebody who is a popular figure who could actually come forward and say, I think we need a republic. I mean, look at the New Statesman this week. They've got a big lead article saying we should scrap the monarchy. And you think to yourself, well, maybe the time has come to having serious conversations about what monarchy should be, because certainly when William becomes king, he'll want a very different kind of monarchy and a very streamlined kind of monarchy. But we don't place his uncle in it. But will there be any place for anyone else? Because, I mean, for instance, I find it hilarious there's this attempt to make Prince Edward happen. And you think to yourself, nobody cares about Prince Edward. No one's ever going to care about Prince Edward. But the fact is, there's not many people left in the monarchy. And actually, one thing I'm going to say, which might surprise regular readers or regular viewers, this is all putting the Harry and Meghan stuff in great perspective. Because you might not like Harry and Meghan, you might think they're a pair of unscrupulous grifters who have been using their royal titles in order to make money. I think that's all true. But nothing they have done comes remotely close to this. And I think that's a real distinction we have to make, because I see people saying that Harry should be stripped of his titles. I'm thinking, but why? I mean, that's the thing. You might not like the man. You might think he's unscrupulous. You might think his wife is to be discussed. But nothing they have done, to me, comes remotely close to anything that Andrew has been accused of. I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yes, and I think as well, once you've had the distance of a few years with sort of the height of the Harry and Meghan controversy and then moving to America and so on, and you think, what kind of damage do they do to the monarchy? I mean, it does seem to pale into insignificance compared to the Andrew story, which is right at the heart of the monarchy and is still sort of carrying on.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting, because Harry and Meghan, obviously, they exiled themselves voluntarily. They, obviously, Harry in his memoir Spare, there's some very disobliging comments about his family, about the institution of the monarchy. And we can debate how right that is and how dictated by sour grapes, but of course, bear in mind, Harry decided, right or wrongly, that he'd be better off in California, away from the royal family, with his family. Fair enough. Andrew has not done anything like that. He hasn't shown any sense of remorse. He hasn't shown any sense whatsoever of any of this being done voluntarily. I mean, even that ridiculous statement he was put out last week about, because he's so honourable, he's going to stop using the Duke of York title and stop being a distraction. You just think, who on earth is crafting this stuff? Because clearly he doesn't have a good private secretary. Clearly he doesn't have anyone around him. I mean, there were rumours that his daughters were helping him with PR stuff. I think, well, he's getting new daughters, if that's what you're going to be doing in terms of PR. Because ultimately, it's not gone well for him. And I think that there's no way it can come back. I just can't see any potential way that Andrew is going to be at the heart of the royal family again. I mean, he's never really been at the heart of the royal family. But I mean, just, not very long ago, we had that bizarre vision of him leading the way in a royal family event. You're saying people should have gathered a long time ago how toxic he is and how damaging to the institution of the monarchy. And the fact is that with Andrew gone, the monarchy can regroup. Now, I don't know what the future holds for it, because I think that if I was a Republican right now, I'd be out there on social media doing big posters on the street with just pictures of Andrew and saying, this is what your money has been paying for. Taxpayers' money has been subsidising a man who's been accused of terrible crimes, and then his family have been complicit in covering it up and allowing him to get away with it. Well, that has to stop. And I think that whatever your feelings, whether you are a committed monarchist, a Republican, or something in between, you look at the Andrew stuff and think this has not gone well for the monarchy, and it probably isn't over. We're probably going to be sitting down in a week or two and having another conversation because something else will have come to light. And I start to think to myself, how much damage can the monarchy sustain? How much more can there be to go? And the question is an infinite amount, because there's going to be a lot more Jeffrey Epstein emails lurking somewhere, aren't there?
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex.
My pleasure.
The British monarchy seems to be like a soap opera. Thank you for listening. This is the end of my transmission. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Pay attention to the health protocol that I have to help slow down the aging process. This is what I have been doing for a very long time. So if you just pay attention and follow my advice, you're going to see some